What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another amazing stream. This time, I am bringing you a very special guest, a Shazo of the highest order. Mr. Kyle Grundy from the Pirhana program is going to be joining me for a Tau faction tier list. We're going to go through every single one of the Tau datasheets, break them down, put them in the different tiers, and tell you which ones to build around, which ones to avoid. And I hope you're going to like this, but without any further introduction, we have Mr. Kyle Grundy himself.
How you doing, Siegler? You good?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to be talking to you, be talking Tau. This is the best time to play Tau in so long.
Absolutely agree. It's a pleasure to be on. We've been chatting for a bit, and wow, what a time it is to be a Tau player.
And everything that I like is good, besides maybe the Taunar.
Yeah, maybe not the Taunar, but Ghostkeels. Oh, finally.
I know both you and I have been doing a ton of hobby work as well to kind of get ourselves situated for the new meta. I finished Farsight, a couple weeks ago. Just the new model is gorgeous. And if you're a Tau fan, just please be excited about this meta because Tau are in a fantastic spot.
Oh, yeah. I've got to work on my Farsight, my new model, and painting my Ghostkeels. So, yeah, that's a good, strong indication on where it's at.
So if you like this type of content from us, we're going to be doing some other faction tier lists as well for the different armies. If you have a favorite one, go ahead and let us know in the comments. But give us a like, subscribe to the channel, let your friends know about what we're doing here. And in addition, if you want to see other Tau content, like some of the games that I play, check out the War Room in the description below, thewarroom.vhx.tv. But if you want to check out Mr. Kyle Grundy and all the stuff he's doing with his amazing community, the Pirhana program, where can they find you, Kyle? What do you do? What do you specialize in? Tell us about it.
So basically, you can find us on Discord. We've got almost 1,000 people community at the moment. We cover everything from your just hobby itself. We also focus on top-level tactics, how to improve your gameplay, and just kind of really focusing on just purely your Tau. That's it. We can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook. Mainly, it's Discord at the moment. I'm going to be reaching out and exploring YouTube eventually, but just a lot going on. Fantastic time to be a Tau player. And if you need some assistance and you want to improve your next, up to the next level in your gameplay, come and join us.
That'd be fantastic. I'm going to add all those links to the description below as well. So if you want to check them out, go ahead and click them down there. But without further ado, let's dive right into this tier list. And how we're going to be organizing it is going to be not the usual S to F tier. Instead, we've kind of put our unique twist on this, starting with auto picks. These are going to be the kind of choices where every single time you build a Tau list, you're probably starting with at least a couple of these, in my opinion. They're the things to build around. Tournament staples are the ones that are almost going to be in every Tau list. They don't have to be, but at the same time, there's such great value that you're going to want to have most of your list revolve around the units in these couple areas. Then you have consistent choice. These are ones that are solid. You can run them in most of your lists and not feel too bad about it. They're not the most efficient choice, but you're probably going to get a lot of value out of them anyway. Average speaks for itself. It's a fine data sheet. It does probably one thing well, but doesn't do too much outside of that. Niche is it does a very narrow, specific thing well, which might depend on the meta. And then finally, YGWY, the classic. This thing just doesn't function as it should. Whatever happened there... maybe ChatGPT wrote it, I don't know, but there's problems if you're all the way down here. And there's a couple of units, unfortunately, down there, but not too many, and not as many as there had been. How do you feel about this ordering, Kyle?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much... There's always going to be something in the YGWY, and I remember way back when we were very... should we say trashed here? There was quite a lot in there, yeah. But thank God it's not the same. In the current meta at the moment, we've only got a few units, but I think it's moved in a positive direction, and I think there's quite a lot up near the top. There's still a couple of niche picks, but yeah, I feel quite comfortable about the way that we're going to rank them.
All right, so typically when we do this, we kind of trade off going one unit, and then switching off to the other person to kind of give a breakdown, and then we'll add our own 2 cents in there. If you have any. So, however, if you have any absolute favorites that you want to do, feel free to just let me know and you can do the breakdown on them. But why don't you start us off here with the Kroot Farstalkers, a new kill team box from the last year or so.
Oh, you put me on the spot there. The Farstalkers, the ones that I've never considered.
I can totally do them if you want.
No. The Kroot Farstalkers. To be honest with you, They're just a Kroot unit that's got a few specialized guns and they can infiltrate, right?
Yep, they have infiltrate, and they're 70 points for 11 models, and they pretty much don't do anything. I believe they pick an enemy unit and they get like precision and lethal hits against it. Their guns are all pretty terrible, so you're not really trying for that. This is effectively, if you're not running stealth suits, this is the unit to go get you area denial, to be in a corner somewhere, to go get investigate signals, to be a screen out on the far flanks of the board. And at 70 points, they used to be like 105 or something ridiculous. 70 points is not bad. They are competing with stealth suits, like I mentioned, and other cheap units like Piranhas. But they are if you want to run them, I think they're kind of fine. Because they actually fill a mission role, and they have enough bodies in the unit that you can screen out like a large section of your deployment zone. But they also die to indirect fire, so that is a problem.
That's the way of the Kroot at the moment, isn't it? It's if you've got indirect, it's like, well, I guess I'll put them in strat reserve, which then defeats the object of having them infiltrating. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think for me, they're 10 more points than the stealth suits, and they're not as survivable. So I'm just not keen. I'd just rather take a standard unit Kroot, if I'm honest. They're cool models, don't get me wrong. I'd love to field them, but I just can't really see a role in my lists to fit them in.
Yeah, I think because they have competitors that are better than them in the role that they're supposed to fulfill, I think they're more in a niche pick. Like, you can run them and not feel bad. They will fill that role for 70 points, but I don't think they're going to... They could either be an average or niche. One of those two is where I'm feeling.
Yeah, there's a little bit of jank that you could do with them because they do have a single Kroot Hound, don't they, in the unit?
I believe so, yep.
So movement 12 gives you a little bit of extra movement, but again, they're there really just to kind of forward stealth, set an objective, do a bit of screening. So you're not really going to be charging anything. So I would put them probably, I kind of want to say, to be fair to them, niche. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's either niche or average, because it's not like a bad data sheet for 70 points. But at the same time, they just are in the Tau index. They just fulfill a role that other units do, and they do it better. So
yeah,
I'm totally happy to throw them down here in niche. Then we have, next up, the lovely Taunar. So this bad boy is... he's a big boy. He's 790 points or something ludicrous after he went up in cost. He does have towering, but towering is no longer as powerful. He can no longer overwatch either. And he suffers fundamentally from the issue that Tau don't split fire too effectively in this edition because of taking that -1 ballistic skill penalty if they are guided and not shooting at the spotted unit. So, in my opinion, I'm pretty cold on the Taunar right now. It brings a lot of high AP weapons or an absurd amount of anti-infantry weapons, but at the same time, it's just not needed for that many points, and I would honestly rather probably have 2 Stormsurges, because then I have 2 deadly things instead of just one that doesn't split that effectively. How do you feel about the Taunar?
Yeah, I think also one of its rules as well, coordinated strike, when it's guided, it gets to reroll hit roll of 1. But if you're going to be taking this, surely you're going to be guiding it with Tetras. So therefore, that's one of its rules out the bank, gone. Mm-hmm. And I think that as much as Towering's affected it, because it is so big, Towering can now hide behind terrain, but this guy's huge. So you're not really going to be able to hide it either way. So I think I'm with you on that one in terms of the 2 Stormsurges. The only thing what I do like about it is it's the only model that we've got that's T13.
Yep.
And it's got 30 wounds. Right? And a 2-up save, but it's only got a 5+ invulnerable save. If it had a 4-up invulnerable, there's arguments to say that actually it could be good, but a 5-up, it's a bit meh, and it can still go down, and it's a lot of points. How many points did you say it was? Like 700 and something?
I believe it's 790. It's quite expensive after it increased in cost alongside a lot of towering units towards the beginning of the edition. So before that increase, it was actually pretty solid for its points, frankly. But now with all the other changes to Towering and the Overwatch change, I just less and less reason to run it, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the Triaxis cannons were quite nice because it's D6 plus 3 shots, blast, strength 9, AP 3 damage. But again, for the same points, you're getting 2 Stormsurges.
And the Pulse Ordnance is a anti-infantry 2+ weapon that's flat 3 damage. AP 1 ignores cover. with having a marker light helping you be the guided unit, so the observer. I'm just not that convinced that it's worth the points, frankly. I think, however, it's not YGWY because it actually does shoot hard. It does fill a role of doing damage. It just doesn't do it anywhere near as effectively as a lot of the other units. So
yeah, I just don't quite like having a model that's that many points because it gives me anxiety thinking if that thing goes down, then I'm pretty much 800 points down out of the game.
The peak of the Taunar was when shield drones existed, and you could surround it with like 60 of them. And if your opponent couldn't put through enough damage, it would just table them. And I won a lot of RTTs and like small GTs with the old days Taunar. But I think he's a niche pick now. I think you can run him and build a list around him where he can still perform fine. He will just come up against those harder anti-tank matchups and not really perform that well there. Or against an MSU army, he just doesn't bring too much. I don't think he's YGWY because he actually has solid guns. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I've never owned a Taunar, but I've definitely watched you on games with it, and the pinnacle of the shield drones, like you said, and then charging him in was funny, but you just don't have that niche little play anymore, and it's just there just to exist, maybe kill some stuff and then die. So I think niche is definitely an appropriate place to put it.
And you can't strike and fade him either. He doesn't have fly, I believe. You used to be able to with the older version.
Yep.
But he's kind of stuck there. All right, moving on to the Kroot Shaper. You're funnily enough, you're getting some of the Kroot early on.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
Tell us about the Shaper, man.
Right, so the Shaper, I actually really like the Shaper. If he wasn't, is it 40 points now? Yeah. Originally, when he came out, it was 50 points, and I thought it used to be 25. That's a big increase. So then, if you have a look at kind of what he does, my friend painted an entire Kroot army over lockdown, and he had 270 Kroots, and he kindly donated this entire Kroot army to me. And I was like, okay, maybe there's some play there. So I had a look at some of the abilities. The Shaper commands, your unit has a 6-up Feel No Pain, but if they destroy an enemy unit in the fight phase, they then become 4+ Feel No Pain. So thinking about how the game is currently, a lot of fixed secondaries are taken, like deploy teleport homers, and it forces people to the middle of the board to do the cheeky 3 points a turn. So people are using small little trading units to do that. They're not using the big units of Terminators or anything valuable. So actually, the niche becomes, if you take a Kroot Shaper in a unit of Kroot and charge them, maybe do a little bit of Plink Fire from other units, and you pull off a 4+ Feel No Pain, that unit becomes incredibly difficult to remove at the center of the board. Or it will get removed, but then it'll take quite a lot of resources to down it. And I quite like the idea of that. How do you feel about it?
So, honestly, it is cool tech. I think it would work better in an MSU edition. Right now, in Index Hammer, there's a lot of armies that are incentivized to get the value out of their enhancements and their characters to run a big brick of something super durable or super, tons of firepower. If this was kind of towards the end of 8th edition, where there was a lot of small MSU trading pieces, a lot of cheap nonsense floating into the middle of the table, and some armies still do that, of course, but I think some of the top armies that Tau could potentially be facing don't really have that type of tool where the Kroot are going to be able to pop their benefit. So how I think about him is he is just a cheap resource. And that's basically how I did in 9th edition, where when he was able to grab the Advanced Scrambler, obviously they don't let him grab any of the enhancements anymore. Not that he really would. But then he had a utility as just a cheap thing, and he can still just investigate signals or stand over in a corner somewhere. But I think there are better tools for 40 points. He was ludicrously cheap, like 25 points previously?
25 points, yeah.
That was worth it. Just have a 25-point unit, although he competed with Kroot Hounds, and he still does right now. So I'm a little cold on him as having value because I don't really like running Kroot. But if you are running Kroot, then I think he goes up significantly, obviously, in value.
And I think the problem is as well is that, like you said, before we used to have like a niche application for him that was actually really helpful to, say, crisis suits, because you could have him with the EM Scrambler, you could stop demons, you could stop deep striking units coming in and hurting your crisis suits. Now he just doesn't fill that role. And the problem I have, if you take him solo, then he's just another character for your opponent to kill with indirect. And as all Tau players know, We give away lots of points on Bring It Down. You're pretty much handing your opponent 20 points, and you don't really want to be handing them easy assassination points either. So I think that it would be fair to say most of the Kroot stuff is probably going to go in niche. So I would put in niche, but there's a temptation to put in YGWY because for 40 points for that stat line is just not good.
Exactly. I agree. We can leave him in niche for now, and at the end, if we want to reassess and throw him into YGWY, he does not do. There are cheaper characters in the game, funnily enough. Like the Admech Marshal is cheaper. He's 35 points, and he's 1,000 times better in every single way.
Yeah.
More defense, a better gun, better rules. It's just okay, and he can actually join units that are more useful. So,
and his combat's not even good either. He's got 3 attacks at strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. Yes, he has ritualistic feeding. If he ends a charge move, you get an extra 3 attacks with a rubbish weapon.
Wow,
nice.
All right, so let's leave him in niche for now, but we could always drop him down because he's just overcosted for the little that he does. He is just a body, in my opinion. Next up, we have one of the worst data sheets in the entire game.
I'm glad you got this one.
So this is the tactical drones, and you get your little tactical drone. These are the only drones that exist like physically on the table now, and Games Workshop really just don't want you to ever use them. They really want to make sure that you never put a single drone on the table again. And I think they all but called me out in that article about the stringing of drones and why they got rid of it. Come on, Games Workshop. It was so fun to see just a flood of drones all over the board. But anyway, these guys are 70 points. They do nothing. You can easily get drones in pretty much any of the main battlesuit units, and you have plenty of flexibility to get gun drones if you really want them. Shield drones for extra wounds, but this is basically just bringing some gun drones. Can you bring the marker drones in this, or is it just gun drones?
I think it's just gun drones.
Yeah, I think it's just gun drones for 70 points. No,
not at all. Absolutely.
This is the same price as a Firesight Marksman. It's 10 points more expensive than 3 stealth suits with all the upgrades they can buy. It's ludicrous. It's one of the worst units in the game. I put it up there with like Uthar from Votan. Just completely pointless. It is a data sheet. If they don't want drones to exist, don't let them. I get that it might be for the fluffy players, but at least put a price point that's not ridiculous. Like these guys for 40 points, okay, I can actually think about maybe using them. I probably still wouldn't, but yeah, I can think about it.
You think about it as a cheap, fast screen, but then we have Kroot Hounds for that. And like you, I think the drones, I used to get ridiculed at the UKTC because when I pulled the trick with the Firesight Marksman or the commanders with drones, and then you have the commander behind a unit for character protection, and then the drone stringing out, you could still put banners down and various things like that. It took them all of one event to then deliberately FAQ it in our tournament scene. But the funny thing is that GW don't want us to use drones, but all tournaments are saying bring your drones or at least tokens. So it's kind of like being pulled in 2 directions.
Yeah, which is ludicrous.
It's ludicrous. But no, drones, YGWY for me. What about you?
Yeah, it's 100% YGWY. There is no point in this unit. Is one of the 10 worst data sheets in the game.
It's mad.
All right. So next up we have the Ethereal. This is just the base Ethereal, and I believe he is 50 points.
50 points. Okay. Yeah. So the Ethereal for me, I've always loved Farsight, and I know you have too. So it's a bit of a bone of contention because it's like, well, we can't take them if we're taking Farsight. But if we talk about lists that want to field an Ethereal, he's 50 points. He can generate you a CP on a 4+, and you can do it whilst off the board.
Yep.
So he can just CP farm you, and if you're taking units like your Breacher Fish or Crisis Suits, or basically any of the tricks that you want to do with your stratagems, that extra CP can come in handy, especially if you're choosing to go fixed rather than tactical. So I think it has a good application, and the Feel No Pain ability for a unit is okay. You can give them 5 up Feel No Pain for your unit, mixed with the Guardian Drone, and we'll get onto that later, but it's a nice little combo, but I wouldn't say it's a staple. I'd say the Ethereal for me would probably be an average pick. Yeah. Not a consistent choice. I would put it in average simply because the CP farming is good and it's relatively cheap for what it does.
I would agree with that. It's a unit that can gain a marker drone, and so if it had the army rule, it would actually be a good little thing to generate CP, come down in a corner, and then give for the greater good. But the fact that the Ethereals don't have it, once again, it's another resource that you're using that also can't help buff your main army. And I found that there's a real... Once you add in your damage dealers, you have to have enough marker light and observer sources to be able to efficiently get multiple turns out of these. Because often they want to do an action, like in the corner where you can't quite get visibility to an enemy unit, or if they're in the middle of the table, they're then getting traded. And if you run low on those type of units, your late game could be a little less effective than otherwise would be. So I found that every time I want to run a cheap unit, I always say, can I also act as an effective observer with the marker light keyword? And unfortunately, the Ethereals don't have that, so it's a knock against them. On top of that, obviously I love Farsight, and I prefer him, especially at the mid points. So I think a lot of players will kind of lean that direction. The other thing is I think there is a better Ethereal to bring that we will get to. So he kind of just gets a little bit left out.
I think most of the list that I've seen with a single Ethereal tends to just be in strat reserve on his own, not leading a unit, and just for that CP farming. So that's why I put it as average. Otherwise, it would be YGWY for me, because Ethereals are meant to lead, but then they don't know the greater good rule. So,
Yeah.
So you put a gun drone on him just in case you wanted to advance him and do actions. So I'd say average.
I agree with that. All right, so that's going to move us on to Mr. Darkstrider. So Darkstrider was previously 75 points. He's now down to 60, which is a much more agreeable price. On top of that, he's Infiltrate and Scout. He brings a 12-inch aura of your opponent can't come in from reserves or redeploy units within, which is fantastic into armies like GSC or Grey Knights or Demons that have access to rules where they can come 3.1 away. On top of that, he also gives a Pathfinder unit that he can join, +1 to wound, which means that they do quite a bit more damage than you would honestly expect, especially once they're in Kalyan. So I think Darkstrider is a fantastic character. I always try and get him into my lists, especially if I'm planning on playing against those type of armies where he's fantastic. He can also help push back rapid ingress, and then his Pathfinders become a kind of barrier, because you can run the grab drone in there as well, or use the photon grenade strat. And all right, they came down for rapid ingress, they moved up. Well, they're still -2 to their charge, and they could fail that. And if they don't, they hit a screen, and then my crisis units obliterate them. So it's one way to push back some of these big Terminator bricks that are very annoying when they're with their rapid ingress. Although Tau have other screening tools as well, of course. But I personally think he's a consistent choice. He doesn't make all my lists, but I really like Pathfinders now at their new price. Him going down cheaper, I think he is a unique tool. I don't think he needs to be in every list, but he is good enough to run consistently at the tournament level, I believe.
Yeah, so you've hit the nail on the head there, and it's something that actually in the last week I've been playing with, and we haven't talked about Darkstrider, me and you privately, we're both on the exact same wavelength. I ran him in a unit of Pathfinders, and I gave him the -2 charge drone. And basically the thought process is, well, Darkstrider's on one side of the unit, so a clever player would try to deep strike to the other side, because the 12-inch denial is only from Darkstrider's model. So if you then have the -2 to charge on the unit, then they're going to be needing to make an 11-inch charge from the other side. And if you put them in a Devilfish, that whole package is 225 points. But that moment you need to screen out, you can screen out half of the board with this unit. And you could cleverly position this unit. And if you don't need to spread quite widely, you can still keep them within 3 inches of the Devilfish, and then go back into the Devilfish for a CP. So I think this unit, and also being able to spot for 2 units, is really good, especially if you're running multiple Ghostkeels. So it's a very clever tech piece that I don't think people will see coming. And it's not that expensive for what it does. It's not there to deal damage. It can deal damage with a +1 to wound, but for me, it performs at least 4 or 5 roles. Screening, primary denial. You can get into position really early because his scout move applies to the Devilfish as well. So, really good tool, and I actually would agree, consistent choice.
Yeah, I honestly think when I add Devil, like he's in my list right now with the Pathfinder unit, because I found that putting one Pathfinder in line of sight to give 2 observing benefits, and then if they don't have enough firepower or can't get enough things at the angle to kill them, I still have some amount of Pathfinders left. They're still screening, and they just step out again. I get another 2 out of them. Or they actually bring up a real damage dealer to make sure the whole Pathfinder unit dies. So I'm like, awesome. Trading up, baby. So I really like them. And then the other thing I'd say is this type of tool is something, it's kind of like why I really like Farsight, is it just brings a different dimension to the army that it otherwise wouldn't have, and it creates problems for the opponent. It's exactly like the Ghostkeel, it's like Farsight. It's something that puts this army in like a consistent A tier, in my opinion, because a lot of, when you have all these resources layered together, Tau is creating constant problems for their army, not through their damage, but through their tricks and their mobility. And that's the type of Tau I really love to play.
Yeah, not to mention as well, I know I don't know how you've been running your Pathfinders, but I've tested them with the 3 Rail Rifts because they're strength 10, AP 4. I know they hit on 5s because they're heavy, but with a +1 to wound, you can suddenly be wounding, like you could be wounding a Sagittor, for example, on 3s.
If I wasn't running Cyclic Ion, if it wasn't the best weapon in the entire universe, I would consider running the Ions on them, because it's good volume of fire. You have 9 shots exploding in Callion.
Yeah.
But like you said, I agree that the rails are, once again, a different profile to what you typically have, and I really like them as well. They're not as consistent because it's less shots, but man, when you pop off and roll a couple 6s to hit, you're like, oh god, it's time. It's time, boys.
It's time. And I also quite like running Darkstrider when I've got Shadowsun on the list, because they work very well together in the fluff, and it's always nice when you put the lore and the actual in-game play together. But yeah, it's a cool, consistent choice, and it can give you a lot of tech that you wouldn't usually have access to.
Yep. So I was originally saying consistent choice because I didn't know where you would fall, but I actually think he's going to be more of a tournament staple, frankly, because I think GSC are still a lot better than people are giving them credit for. I think Grey Knights are a very annoying matchup, and just having this, also, I believe it stops the Encarn's reposition as well. Has tournaments ruled on that?
I'm not too sure. I'd have to check, because I didn't actually think of it that way, actually, because I just thought, oh, well, Eldar will be able to do Eldar stuff anyway.
I believe those type of rules stop repositioned and redeployed units, which would include the Encarn, which once again would give greater value. Put a little asterisk next to that. We could totally be wrong here, and that might be an event-by-event decision. I'm not sure. But I just want to throw it out there as another powerful tool that this could potentially help.
Yeah, 100%. So,
don't quote us on that, please.
That could be a problem. Well, let's put them as a tournament staple, and then we can rejig things around, because I actually do agree. I love tech pieces. I love little janky stuff that people don't predict, and I do definitely agree with you that it can stop quite a lot of shenanigans coming from other armies, especially Grey Knights as well.
Grey Knights is a tricky matchup for sure. All right. Next up, we have the Cadre Fireblade here. So the Cadre Fireblade can join the Strike Team or the Breacher Team. His rule is that he gives them +1 attacks to their ranged weapons, and this matters because your gun drones are ranged weapons if you add them. Your Breachers are all 2 shots, now go to 3. So him in a unit, they can pump out a tremendous amount of damage. On top of that, he is a great caddy for Through Unity Devastation, which is lethal hits. And that's something that Cyclic Ion particularly likes when it tries to punch up into other units. So I think the Fireblade going down to 40 points, I would prefer running him than the Ethereal most times, because for 20 points I then get Through Unity in my list, and that's only 10 points more than the Ethereal. Frankly, I'd rather have access to lethal hits on my Cyclic Ion Crisis unit. So if you are running Breachers, I like always having one of these units, because not only is it a superb damage dealer, getting the reroll wounds if the enemy unit's on the objective and all the extra shots, you don't have to commit your Crisis unit to try and kill Chaff. Instead, this unit just deletes it by itself. Instead, you can also punch up with them, because once you hit turn 3 and you're in Callion, you get all the exploding attacks, and you can access point blank ambush for the extra AP. And then at AP 2, ignore cover, rerolling the wounds. It's another unit that punches up beyond its points value. So I don't think it's going to be in every list, because it really fits into the Breacher Devilfish style, and that can be tricky. One of the things about Devilfish is that they occupy such a large space that it can be tricky to fit them on certain terrain formats. One of the reasons why Darkstriders and the Pathfinders scout move for the Devilfish is really useful. You can start on the line and then get behind that midfield ruin. But the Fireblade can't help with that. So you could also just run them without the Devilfish, come in off a flank, blow something up on an objective, and use the lethal hits and your vision to help be an observer somewhere. So I think he's definitely a consistent choice.
Definitely. I'd actually
if not a
put
tournament
him-
staple.
Now, it depends on tournaments. I was torn between tournament staple and consistent choice. Now, I'm going to crack the egg open here and probably reveal something that then people are going to watch out for, and then it'd be annoying for us. But I used to use the Pure Tide chip for double rapid ingress before GW decided, oh, we're going to stop that. And I was really annoyed because that was one of my tech pieces for LGT, double rapid ingress in Crisis Suit. So I thought, how could we apply the Pure Tide Neurochip to the Cadre Fireblade? And you could potentially get 2 units back into a Devilfish. The problem with this is that if they just charge the unit with the Cadre Fireblade in first, you can't do that. But if nobody predicted that, then you could pull off a neat trick where you could have both Breacherfish jumping back into a Devilfish.
Yeah, I think if the meta switched back to a more aggressive kind of like trading melee style, that would be fantastic to utilize. Right now, I think Tau are more worried about the shooting. I don't know how you feel, but I get more worried about getting into a shootout with people that have a bunch of really high damage units, because then it's going to come down to angles. It's going to come down to who has better screens, who's going to be the first one to commit, especially if they have really high toughness and potential minus damage or half damage or stuff like that, or minuses to wound. That gets pretty annoying for Tau. So I have kind of leaned away from running this type of thing and spending CP on it. But if the meta switched to a more MSU type of trading game, then I would really like a lot of Breachers and Devilfish, frankly. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think I agree at the moment it's basically shooting gallery. But I do think we're going to see a little bit of a switch with the Tyrannid Endless Horde. And we'll need to bring characters that give us extra shots and small arms fire to deal with loads of Hormagaunts and Termagaunts. And I do think that could come in quite niche in that particular matchup. But overall, against other things, it's not as important. So I'd say it would be fair to say he's not a tournament staple now, but I can definitely see it moving up a tier when the meta changes and evolves, especially after LGT and other big events are happening after the balance data slate.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing is the cyclic weapon is so good that it doubles as anti-infantry. It's anti-tank, anti-elite, anti-infantry.
Anti-everything.
And because of that, I have felt the less need to bring Breachers because I already have their role covered. But their role as a primary denial and like a cheaper trade piece is still very valuable, and we'll get to them when we talk about them. But how you feeling? Tournament staple?
I'd say Cadre Fireblade at the moment, put him as a consistent choice. Because most people will put them in with Breachers because they like having extra shots and using the Breachers. But for now, I wouldn't class it as a tournament staple just yet.
Yeah, I think meta changes, he becomes more valuable. But if you are one of the type of players who's looking at just going to RTTs, playing with your friends locally, that's totally fine. I think he actually is a tournament staple, or not a tournament staple, but like a friendly game, a casual game staple. He's
especially in the lower points games. I have a few of my members that are only playing like 1,000-point leagues and stuff like that. And I said, well, absolutely. For 40 points, you can't go wrong, and you can put upgrades and enhancements on, like you mentioned, the lethal hits. It's really good. But obviously, towards the 2,000 points higher stakes tournaments, I would say not yet.
Okay. Next up, we have the Hammerhead. So
oh, God.
It was a magical 155 points. It's only 130 now. I believe it. Was it 155 or 145?
It was 145, and I think Longstrike was 155, give or take.
Gotcha. So
too
expensive
down at least
for 15 points. It's 130 points now. For the Hammerhead, you get either an ion weapon, which just take cyclic ion, or you get the railgun, which is string 20, AP 5, 6 plus D6 damage, one shot. God help you if you roll the sustained hits, then it's awesome. And 2 seeker missiles, couple anti-infantry accelerator burst cannons. It's a decently durable platform. How do you feel about the Hammerhead?
I've just put it straight in YGWY. Sorry. I'm not messing around on this one. Why? I'm really angry that they've basically lost the ignoring buns. And you hit the nail on the head with the ion. Well, I could just take cyclic. But I actually, if I was to run them, I would run them with the ion simply because of the range. And it's good against the mirror. And I just don't really like rolling one shot and then watching it miss or fail to wound, regardless of its strength. You always will roll a 1, and then you're just sad. And I just think it needs more rules. I think it needs ignore invulns. It'd be nice to see it have some sort of ability that if you're hit with the railgun, I don't know, let's make up one on the spot. You're automatically battle shock test because you've just been hit by a big railgun. Anything, but it just doesn't have anything for me. And I've just fallen out of love with it, if I'm honest.
So I think there's... So it does have a couple extra rules. First, it has +1 to hit against monsters and vehicles, which means it hits on 3s. And you can very easily get it +1 ballistic skill if you have an observer unit. Then on top of that, it has a reroll to hit or a wound. So like it has a very solid data sheet. The gun itself is inconsistent, but it does have a couple good targets. We're about to see a meta where there are a bunch of Redemptor Dreadnoughts everywhere. -1 damage, 2-up save, sits in cover, gets Armor of Contempt, and can be a bear to deal with. The Hammerhead actually is one of the best tools in the game for killing it. I've rolled it out a bunch of times because Jack is the type of player to just jam 3 Dreadnoughts on the table and walk them up the table. Well, guess what? If you run 2 to 3 Hammerheads, you do just clean them out. And you don't have to use your Crisis unit. And the reason is because their AP5 ignores cover, so even with Armor Contempt, it's a 6-up. And so it's pretty much punching through very consistently. Once you hit Kalyan and it can pop off, potentially getting sustained hits, it's even powerful. But without that, it beats the Redemptors in the shootout. Now, you're saying, wow, okay, that actually sounds pretty good. However, it is one shot against anything that has an invuln. It is not anywhere near as good. So you can roll it against like Tyranid monsters and whatnot, and then it's always better just have volume of fire. So it's specifically good into Armor of Contempt units without invulns, which is a niche in my opinion. So I would put it in niche and not YGWY, but it fundamentally needs a second shot on the railgun, or the railgun needs to do something else. I think it should have anti all the different keywords, personally.
Yeah.
And that way it procs the dev wounds very consistently. That's the way to get around not ignoring invulns, which I feel, I understand is probably a feels bad mechanic. Okay, my thing that should actually save me against stuff isn't. Well, now they just introduced dev wounds as you don't get invulns or armor saves. So I would rather just have the dev wounds interact with more keywords. And that way it fits with 10th edition style. That's how I would change the railgun, honestly.
Yeah, I think you made a fair point. I mean, knowing that I'm doing the LGT Invitationals and Innes Wilson is running 3 Dreadnoughts.
NASA's too.
So, yeah. It does make sense on that one, but again, it's very niche. So if it's very niche, then let's put it in the niche.
Yeah, like it is actually good in that role. I rolled it out so many times because it was like, if I just show up and put this on the table, pick them all up in a turn. It's hilarious. Usually the railgun doesn't do it by itself, obviously, because of -1 damage, but the Seeker missiles pop through, and then you pretty much always one-shot them. And even if you have to split off some fire in the next turn, or you leave one at a wound or 2, it's fine. You'll kill them the next turn. And this is without firing a Crisis unit. So, all right, Skyray. The Skyray has very similar rules. It has that reroll inbuilt, and it has just 3 Seeker missiles that you shoot turn after turn. Instead of having a bunch of one-shot weapons like it used to, and it was completely terrible, except for Alpha Striking. Now it has a consistent 3-shot, Strength 14, AP3, D6 +1 damage, and it also has the Marker Light keyword, so it can kind of sit at a flank and go ahead and give you access to a good observing unit if needed. It's at 130 points as well, so same price as the Hammerhead. It doesn't have the super high AP that the Hammerhead does, but it has more consistent shots, and that Marker Light keyword means it's a useful observing tool. So I think the Skyray is pretty average right now, personally.
I'd agree, and it gets the reroll, the hit roll against fly?
Yep. Hit or wound.
Yeah, and obviously then it's got the target and array still as well. So it's a shame you can't take additional Seekers on it, can you?
No, unfortunately. If you could take 2 additional once per game ones, that would be sweet.
That would be good.
Then I would honestly rate it a consistent choice, because then you have that power where, boom, all of a sudden you run 2, they're sitting in your corners, they pop off that turn, and then they just consistently chip the rest of the game.
So I have seen people putting more Skyrays than Hammerheads in the list just for that backfielder. Again, reliable, tough, spotter, but also it's got the seekers, which are consistent. Strength 14 is nice. It helps you into things like knights, land raiders, the hecaton, land fortresses. So it's good, but I wouldn't say it's a consistent or tournament staple.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It just doesn't have quite enough volume to guarantee it does the damage it needs to, but it's still average overall. It'll do okay for you. Okay.
The Razorshark.
Yeah, tell us about the Razorshark. I know there's like a small niche of the Tau community that is obsessed with the Razorshark.
Yeah, so it's a flyer, T10, 3+ save, 12 wounds, it's range weapons. You've got your quad iron turret, so it's just cyclic. It's got 8 shots, hazardous, strength 8, AP 2 damage, twin linked if you're overcharging, or strength 7, AP 1 damage. Seeker missiles, abilities. You've got the ground strike fighter. Each time this model makes a range attack that targets an enemy unit that cannot fly, add 1 to the hit roll. So then you'll be hitting on 3s, and then you could spot, be hitting on 2s. But that's about it. It's not really. It's got a missile pod, so it's 2 shots, strength 7, 1 note. So how many points is a Razorshark? Probably. I'm not even looked at it, but 100. I'd say probably 140.
I believe it's 155.
So I mean, that's a lot of points for something that's not really filling any of the role that anything else isn't.
The fact is yes, it can come off the table and like start to shoot something. It doesn't shoot that hard. It really wants support. So that's support that's not going elsewhere. And its defense is pathetic. Most flyers have pathetic defense now because they don't have. Most of the flyers don't even have the -1 to hit anymore, which is solid, but not like I'm gonna survive against an army that shoots. In a shooting edition, when it's actually harder to get angles nowadays on stuff like GW terrain, maybe the UKC terrain, like you can't. Your opponent's going to be able to screen out, so they can't get these juicy angles into your deployment zone. And at that point, are you coming down with a 155 point flyer to kill a chaff screen unit and then insta die in return? Probably not.
And it's actually 165 points, so it's even more.
Excuse me, it's worse than I thought.
It's worse than we thought. And the other thing is as well, the issue that I have with the flyers, and we'll get onto the bomber as well, is that in order to use it effectively, you have to rapid ingress it. Now, ask yourself a question. What would you rather rapid ingress? A 6-man Crisis Suit and Farsight or a plane? I'll take 6-man and Farsight, thank you very much. And for 165 points, guess what's 180 points? 3 Crisis Suits. So, come on.
Yeah.
No. No.
I know that there is a small segment of people who like them just because it brings a bunch of volume of fire from... you can run 2 or 3 of them. Just run the Crisis Suits. It will be so much better. I really think that this data sheet is pretty poor overall.
Yeah.
But we can put it in niche because it's not like horrendous like the tactical drones.
No.
Like, it's overcosted for what you get, but I don't really want flyers to be undercosted because that meta sucks. So I think it's a niche pick. Like, you can run this in a casual game and not feel too bad about it, is how I feel about it. Whereas tactical drones, they are literally wasted points.
Literally wasted points. I agree. So maybe you could take the Sunshark Bomber because I think we're both going to pay for our past sins here. And let's talk about the Sunshark Bomber. What does it do?
So it also has... I think it finally has less firepower than the Strike Fighter, the fire jet.
Yeah.
It used to have a lot more firepower, hilariously. But it's got its missile pod, it's got the Seeker missiles, and then it has the ion guns, which, fine. But its real rule is the pulse bombs. It used to be able to do quite a bit of mortal wound output. Now you only ever roll 6 dice, but on 3-ups it's mortals. So it's a decent amount of mortals. However... it's really hard to maneuver these things, and I believe you can't fly off the table anymore and do bomb. You have to resolve the ability.
Yep.
Yeah, you end a normal move, which is not off the table. So it's a lot harder to just bomb things than it used to be. You used to just start on the board. You had access to redeploy, so you could always go back into reserve and not take enemy firepower. Because aircraft are still one of the things that ignore the ruin roll. Towering no longer does it, but aircraft still do, which means they can be shot back. And these flyers don't put out enough output for me to want to just get into a shootout with them, frankly. So If the bombs were higher amount of mortals, like maybe you roll 10 dice on 3-ups as mortals, then I could start thinking like maybe I put them in my backfield and then I get them up, clear out some durable thing that wants to hide behind the middle ruin, maybe like a Wraithguard unit, just dump a bunch of mortals on there. That could be something that could work, but this is just not a good data sheet. What is it, like 10 points cheaper?
Yeah. If I check the
I believe
points
it's slightly
wise,
cheaper.
it is 150.
Okay, so it's 15 points cheaper.
15 points cheaper, yeah.
Yeah, which it's reasonable. I think once again, it's a unit you could run and not feel too bad about it if you like the model. It's gonna not do as much as you want it to, and it's probably gonna be one of the worst units that you are running in your list. But it's not so insanely bad that it's actively hurting your army. Is how I feel about it.
I'd say it's a niche pick. I'd say, if you've had the model from the previous editions, it's a lovely model. Don't get me wrong. Have fun in casual games, but it's got no place in tournaments at the moment. Yeah. And I say at the moment optimistically.
Just for the moment.
So,
just looking at it, like the Shaper really needs to come down.
Yeah.
There's really no point in that data sheet. He should bring a fundamental buff to encourage you to run Kroot, and his buff is just not that.
No, it's so he's going down to YGWY.
Yeah, I'm just dropping him down now, just looking at it. Like, those units are all, like, have some sort of purpose that they can lean on.
Mm-hmm.
His purpose is entirely useless and redundant.
Yep. But, speaking of not useless,
or
Ghostkeel. Ghostkeel.
I'll let you take the Ghostkeel.
Absolutely. Okay, so the Ghostkeel's been hiding in the shadows, watching us have fun with Riptides throughout the entire of pretty much 7th, 8th, 9th. Ghostkeel been like, last time I ran a Ghostkeel was when there was a formation in 7th edition where you had 1 Ghostkeel and 2 Stormsurges. And then it just sat on my shelf, collecting dust. 10th edition, they're back. They are so good. So Ghostkeels. They have an arrangement of rules. 1, they have Infiltrate. Mm-hmm. They have Stealth. Their movement 10, toughness 8, 2+ save, 12 wounds, and the best thing about it, lone operative. Now, if that wasn't enough, how about the 2 stealth drones? So the 2 stealth drones are just basically twice per battle. After an attack has been allocated to this model, you can change the damage characteristic of that attack to 0. So they hit, they wound you. You choose to blank it, you don't roll a save, and then that's cool. You just damage 6, no problem, it's damage 0. And they have a good gun. They have 2 good guns. I prefer the Cyclic Iron Raker because I like range, and I know there's play of doing the fusion, but the Cyclic Iron Raker is 36-inch range, one of the only guns that we have that's kind of kept a very good mid-range, with missile pods being reduced. It's 6 shots, strength 7, AP 1, damage 2. You can overcharge it. Hazardous, but it's only 1 roll rather than the gratuitous amounts of dice that you have to roll for hazardous with crisis, and it becomes strength 8, AP 2, 3 damage. You can take the Fusion Collider. Not too bad against vehicles. It's only 2 shots, 18-inch range, melt 2, strength 12, AP 4, D6, and then you almost always take it with the Twin Fusion on the top, with melt 2 twin linked. If you're running these, I would strongly recommend running minimum of 2. If you want to get aggressive, I'd say use 3, and maybe there's play to have 1 of them with the Fusion and 2 of them the Iron Rakers. But for me, this is by far one of my favourite models and favourite units to run in 10th. How do you feel about it, Siegs?
It is a straight-up auto pick in my mind. I always start the list with having at least 2 of them, like you mentioned, and I often run 3 in most of my lists. And I signaled it before when I was talking about Darkstrider and mentioned Farsight. Mm-hmm. This is an entirely unique data sheet to Tau. And the amount of frustration that this unit can cause people is utterly insane. If you are the type of Tau player to thrive on your opponent's misery, the Ghostkeel is the data sheet for you. Let me tell you, this thing is fantastic. And it went down 10 points. I was already running it at 170, 160, love it even more. But the great thing about it, like Kyle mentioned, is how you want to use it and how you want to use Tau, because Tau is generally most powerful in the mid-range of the table, kind of that center 24-inch area. It doesn't do devastating damage into your opponent's deployment zone, and unless you run like particular tanks and they have their own problems. But for Tau, you're trying to control the middle of the board. And the Ghostkeel is the tool that you can put in the center of the board, and your opponent has to do something about it. Yep. Okay, the Ghostkeel's touching the center objective. Say we're on like one of the Games Workshop layouts where it's pretty easy to get a nice little angle, like just barely touching the objective and then hiding so that you get cover and all that stuff. Well, your opponent has to get within 12 of you to do anything about this. So their decisions are, I get within 12 to try and kill the Ghostkeel. If they do this, they have to put enough firepower that they might realistically kill it, otherwise they're just throwing away a unit. Okay, so now they're putting a lot of stuff to try and kill the Ghostkeel. They still, frankly, might not kill the Ghostkeel. Yeah. And they might trade a bunch of stuff that they get to kill your Crisis Suits without having to overcommit them. The thing about Crisis Suits is you don't want to put them in the early game in a position where they can easily get shot back by a bunch of damage dealers. You want to use that Strike and Fade, keep them alive. Well, with Ghostkeels, your opponent has to come to you instead of you having to go to them. And the other decision tree, so let's say they don't want to commit the damage because either it's too much and it still might not work and they might die in return and just lose the game right there, or they contest the objective and they send their cheap resources out. Well, now we're forcing them to send their cheap resources. Most armies only have a handful of those, and all of a sudden later in the game they draw Area Denial or Extend Battle Lines or any of these secondaries, Storm Hostile Objective, and they threw away their cheap trash because they needed to contest the objectives away from the Ghostkeel and they didn't want to use their damage dealers. Well, it's the late game. Now they still have a Ghostkeel problem in the center, and they have to actually try and do secondaries in the center, which means their damage dealers have to start doing it. It just creates a fundamental conundrum for people, and it's an auto pick in my mind.
And it also absolutely helps the Tau secondary game because I look at my list and I think, how many options of fallback and shoot can I put in there? I don't really want to put them on my Crisis Suits because I want to just go pure aggression. The Ghostkeel, I always have the Battlesuit support system to fall back. So then I'll have 3 Ghostkeels and Shadowsun. They've all got fallback abilities and shoot. So therefore, if I do get tied up in combat, I can just disengage and go and do an action if needed to. I don't need to prioritize its shooting. Its job is to bait, be really annoying, and score me loads of points.
Yep, and because of that infiltrate, it can start in the corner near your opponent's board edge.
Yep.
And, as soon as they keep getting close, you can either just put it behind the train piece, or you can just advance it back towards your own support stuff. So once again, they have to get within 12. Now they're in your kill zone. So I just love this unit, and it always overperforms. It also, we didn't mention it, just charge it into stuff. Charge it in.
Just charge.
Charge it in. I charge it into like everything. It's like whatever it is, I'm trying to charge the ends of units, stop them from getting onto objectives, stop them from being able to fall back and do things. Or if it can shoot into combat, it has to then shoot the Ghostkeel. The unit is just value town, and I love it so much.
So we're basically using the Ghostkeel that we used to use our Riptides, Siegs? Just basically, 100%. It's a cheaper Riptide. And it's actually more survivable than a Riptide now. The Ghostkeel's just laughing, and the Riptide's like, I wish I was you.
Yeah, I wish I was my little brother.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely auto pick. Auto pick all day.
Speaking of not an auto pick, we've got the Stormsurge here.
Go on, you take this one.
So the Stormsurge went down slightly in points. I believe it's just a flat 400 points now. It got a big increase going at the beginning of the edition due to the towering rule and, the hubbub about that. And then it's gone back down slightly. So it's still pretty pricey for what you get, and it still has a town art type of problem, but to a lesser extent. And that is, it has a bunch of different guns, usually enough to just kill something dead easily, but then you run out of... When you split fire, you get a lot less efficient with it. It does have some very good rules. It ignores modifiers and gets full rerolls to hit ignores hit modifiers, not ballistic skill ones, but it gets also reroll hits against Titanic units. And towering means it's pretty easy to hide it. It's not like that big. It's not as big as you'd expect. It's still big, but you can get it behind a ruin pretty decently. And you take the Pulse Blast Cannon, and it's flat 12 damage on the closer range profile, or a bunch of flat 4 damage shots. It is a very solid platform, in my opinion. I think it's just a bit overcosted for what you can do with it, and it has that split fire penalty. Once again, if the penalty for splitting when you were guided was removed, a lot of these units would go up in my mind, because they have a lot of different weapon options, and it would incentivize you to use them into the targets they should. Right now, you're incentivized to just put them into one target, And often for something like a Stormsurge, that's dramatic overkill. So I think that's one of its biggest limiting factors. It does have a very good gun. Like flat 12 damage is fantastic. It's actually one of the best vehicle killers this army has. But I find that it's just a little too expensive for what it brings there.
Yeah, I think it's also a victim of the way that tournament organizers tried to fix the towering issue by blocking out like windows and the UKTC. They blocked out the middle ruins and just said it's all line of sight blocking. So I think towering is just, unfortunately for the Storm Surge, yes, you can try and hide it, but it's never going to be able to get the angles on stuff unless you rapid ingressed it or did some plays there, and it's 400 points. When the index came out, I put arms on two of my Storm Surges, played them for like 2 or 3 games, really loved them because they were cheap, and then, they're back on the shelf again. So I just don't really see them. I say they're a bit of a niche pick. I wouldn't say that YGWY. They're just a bit overcosted. I think if they went down in points, and like you said, that split firing penalty went away, I could see them being used, but I'd say niche.
I would say average, personally, because I think it is a very strong profile for what you would get. I think it is better than these other ones down here, personally. Like, I've thought about just adding it in because it brings a type of firepower that you otherwise don't get. And there's a lot of big things that Tau have a very annoying time killing, like Avatar, stuff like that. And this guy can just be like, okay, I'm going to do crippling damage into your big durable target. And I like him for that reason. I think he's better than the stuff that's below here, personally. How do you feel?
Well, I think it comes down to points. And obviously, if we just remove the Crisis Suit points and just think about, we put the Hammerhead in niche, and they were, 135 points?
Yep.
You're effectively getting 3 of those for the price of 1 Storm Surge.
Yeah, he puts out more consistent damage than them, I'll tell you, especially in Galleon. But we can put him at top of niche for now.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, the Commander datasheet.
Okay. Commander datasheet. So we'll go with Cold Start, auto pick. Movement is king in the game. Always has been, always will be. And what does the Cold Star do? Well, he'll just give your Crisis Suit unit +2 movement, and Crisis Suits have an ability to auto advance 6. So basically, that Crisis Suit unit is going 18 inches. And with Crisis Suits gaining the vehicle keyword, it's harder to kind of get around terrain than it once was, because we used to have infantry. We don't anymore. So he is an auto pick if you need to deliver your Crisis Suits to deal the damage where they need to and when they need to. So for me, the Cold Star is just an auto pick. And you can arm the commanders with 4 guns. So you give him typically a marker drone, shield drone, so you'll have 7 wounds, T5, and he'll be doing 12 cyclic shots. And we have one of the best enhancements, Ion. So your army-wide ability for sustain hits 1/2 from turn 2. Yeah, perfect. I'll put him in the list, every list, all the time. What about you?
100%. He is the thing that makes Crisis Suits be able to get into your opponent's half of the board and threaten those angles. Otherwise, Tau would be at the mercy of them staging up on you unless you tie them up in combat, which one of the reasons I like the Ghostkeels. But the Cold Star opens up the option where if our opponent stays at that area just behind their middle ruin and within 18 inches of our kind of angle we're going to get, we can just blow up their key unit. They want to leave a Wraithguard unit there, I'm going to blow them up. They want to leave some critical mission play unit, I'm going to potentially blow them up and then get back behind the train. So I think 1 Cold Star is just mandatory. I don't think you need to run 2. I do in my list, but that's because specifically against Eldar. If we're talking high meta, I like having a second one because it forces them to have a second Night Spinner. And if they only run 1, the other unit's just going to move 18 and kill them. But if they run 2, then I'm in the same spot as what before, and I'm just thankful I have Ghostkeels.
Absolutely. And I did forget to mention that it also gives them the assault keyword, which is the main part. It means that you can obviously advance and still shoot, which is critical. So yeah, I'd say I go with 2 because I like to put the precision of the Patient Hunter on the other one for +1 BS and also +1 to hit, and then +1 to wound from turn 3 onwards. And I do, like you said, having to have 2 units that can suddenly, one can be on the board with Kyle, and the other one can rapid ingress and then yeet 18 inches up the board to deliver the pain train. So absolutely think it's staple. The other commanders, as we're doing them all as a general, I think all the commanders are good. There's multiple ways that you can run them. The Enforcer gives the ability for the unit to reduce a incoming AP by 1. Not necessarily hugely important, but I'd say it's quite niche because you do have a 4-up inbur on your crisis suits usually. What I like the Enforcer for is just running him on his own. You've got a movement 8, fine, he's slow, but you use him to deep strike in. He's toughness 5, he's got a 2+ save, and because he's a single model, you can quite easily get cover save on him. And then he can just sit there with cyclics and be quite frustrating to remove because you've got 7 wounds there if you give him with a shield drone and a marker drone, and he just deep strike in, small body, you can easily fit him in places where your crisis suits wouldn't be able to, and he's only 110 points, I think, or 100 points actually.
He's flat 100, I believe.
100
the
points.
The Cold Star is 110.
Yeah, 100 points for 12 cyclic shots. And if you really wanted to make him more survivable, you could just give him 3 cyclics and a shield generator. And then suddenly that model is incredibly tough to remove, and he's another resource that forces your opponent to have to deal with. And you could just threat overload them.
Yep. So Tau have an activation issue in some lists where you only have a couple real damage dealing activations. Running multiple commanders means all of a sudden you have a bunch of devastating activations, and you can make sure you finish off things effectively instead of having to put a full unit into them. Now, the only downside here of running the commanders solo is that the problem Kyle mentioned earlier, which is you all of a sudden give up Assassinate and bring it down, and that's the point where your opponent is looking at a pretty easy secondary score, which means you're going to have to win the primary, which isn't always Tau's strong suit. So I'm hesitant to run them, but if I was going to run solo commanders, I do like the Enforcer the best now with his new price because of that extra durability.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then the XB8 commander is effectively just movement 10 is a normal crisis suit, but he gives the unit reroll 1s. He's 90 points, so again, if you wanted to have a bit of fun and go back to commander spam, 90 points where again, you just go 12 cyclics. Here's a 90 point drop, another activation for spotting, and does 12 cyclic shocks at strength 8 AP 2 damage. He will die, but again, trading pieces. But like Sieg said, it's Siegler, it's the secondary game which really frustrates me because you're giving away 20 points, so then that's 40, and you have to win the primary, which is sad because I love my commanders.
Yeah, if commander spam was if you couldn't stack assassinate and bring it down like you previously couldn't, then I would be all about it, frankly. But
agreed.
Cold Star straight up auto pick, and then the other commanders are tournament staples in my mind.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and move over to. I have to look close. This is the Breacher team?
Breacher teams. So okay, Breachers. We've already kind of touched on what they do. Their ability is effectively, I get to reroll wounds if you're on an objective, but more importantly, the BS3 standard. So if you do spot them, they become basically hitting on 2s, which is awesome. 20 shots at standard, strength 6, AP 1. The AP 1 is a little bit disheartening. If they were AP 2, I'd be taking them all the time, but they're not there for me to do damage. They're there to potentially kill some small screens and trading pieces, but more importantly, the primary denial. So there is a couple of tricks you can do. I believe you need to check this in terms of different tournaments, because I know that UKTC and WTC have ruled it slightly differently, but there is things that you can do when you come on from Strat Reserve, specifically Rapid Ingress. So your Devilfish has to stay within 6, but the unit getting out does not. So you could play around with primary denial even easier. So I do like the jank and the primary plays that you can do with them, but I wouldn't be looking to take them to put expectations on them of killing loads of stuff. But I'd say that they would definitely be, for me, between consistent choice and tournament staple.
I would agree. I think that they're going to be a tournament staple because having one unit is really nice to, when you have a bunch of stuff in your face and you want to make sure they don't get ahead on primary, this is literally the perfect tool to just drop out, touch that objective, take it away. So even if you don't kill as much as you expect, it's still not going to be a points issue, and you can just finish them off the next turn. And on top of that, one of the things I've really liked about them, or the Pathfinders, which we'll talk about, because they can do the same thing, is the sheer size of the unit, the models, means you can screen and move block in a very effective way against big damage-dealing units. So I'll give you an example. I was playing against Nick's Chaos Space Marines, and I had my army kind of fanning out as Abaddon came into the center and wanted to charge into the meat of my army. Well, instead of just sitting there and shooting where he could kind of surround that, I split off my army into two halves and then had the breachers screen the middle area so he could never get into the ruin and try and hide. And if he wanted to charge through them, he would have to charge through, get on the ends of it in line of sight, and then, okay, he kills a bunch of breachers, and then my crisis unit blows him up. But there was never an opportunity, even with advance and charge, to get at an angle where he'd charge something valuable on either flank. So that's the type of thing you can do with these guys. Here's another example. Your opponent's behind a ruin, and they have their like Wraithguard or whatever, and they obviously want to come out and shoot you the next turn. Okay, what if I just wrap the entire ruin so they can't physically leave it?
Yep.
They're not.
And also, the reverse to that is something that I've thought about as well, is the annoying thing that Phantasm still exists. Actually putting the breaches behind a ruin that the Wraithguard are intending to Phantasm behind so that your crisis suits can't shoot them. So you could actually do it in reverse and block off the area that they're trying to retreat to as well.
Yep. Another reason the Ghostkeels or Tetras are fantastic, any fast-moving thing like that, is you can block spaces. And that's not something other units are really doing. Pathfinders are one of them. But this is an extra value. And because of that, I actually like always having one type of big troop unit to do this type of move. Play against orcs, and they're going to walk through the middle ruin or this big middle passage in the board with all their stuff. You know what? Let's just take a turn off of you getting there. I don't want you on top of me this turn. Next turn it's okay because I'm going to kill half your army this turn. But next turn, we're going to win a turn.
They are our ultimate screen unit because they can be applied to anywhere on the board. I also like the trick of, especially in some of the UKTC maps where the terrain, one of the pieces is like that, so they'll often stage behind and the objective will stick out on the other side as well. So plonking 10 breaches on there is OC 20, and then they've got two choices. They either come out and shoot them, which then your crisis suits then can come and kill that unit, or they go, I'm not going to reveal myself, so I'm going to charge you through the wall, and you deliberately set it up so that they have to do that, and they think they're safe, and then you can just go back into the Devilfish. Yes, they could declare another charge, but they don't want to declare a charge on the Devilfish because, well, they'll be out in the open then, and then you can just move off and go and take their home objective somewhere else and do the same thing. So the amount of tricks you can do with these units because the speed is so good.
Yeah, and don't undervalue the -2 to charge either.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Not
especially
you,
if you did
like
the
people.
-2 and then popped into the Devilfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, good.
You have to take a
think-
battle shock too, so
Yeah.
yeah, with the
Take a
grenade
battle
shot.
shock as well, so they can't potentially re-roll it. So I'd say tournament staple.
Next up is the strike team, which basically does even less damage than the breachers because it's a bunch of no AP shots unless you pop point blank ambush. They have access to 4-up Overwatch, which is cool. It's like interesting against GSC and other armies that have just really cheap chaff units in the mirror matchup if they're charging like Crouton objectives or stuff, but it hasn't come up too often. The reason to think about these guys is that they are 10 points cheaper than the breachers, and every Tau list that Kyle and I build has a weird amount of points left at the end. So if you can downgrade like a breacher or Pathfinder unit because of points, this is the unit that you would take, is how I think about it.
Yeah, agreed. And we were talking about this before. One of my lists was 2,005 points because I ran double breach fish, and I was like, that's really annoying. I can't drop anything else because I've got all the things that I want. And then I looked at strike teams. I was like, I feel like I'm shortchanging myself, but fine, come on. And they're like, finally, we get to play. And then I looked at the rules and I tried and justified it. And actually, to be fair, they do have an extra tool for you to put in your toolbox, and that's what I like about Tau, is putting as many tools in your toolbox as possible. And I think there is a niche application to something maybe coming to try and charge me, and I happen to be on an objective and I could overwatch. It means that small little trading units can't really be used effectively. My strikes can overwatch. Not bad. You know what? I'm saving the points, which is primarily why I put them in, but actually you've got another tool there to use, and it might pop up, it might not, but it's still useful. and they still perform the same role as the breaches by primary denial and jank.
Where would you put them here?
I'd
Because I think
average.
they're. I agree 100%. Even though they might slide into lists, I think they slide in on the technicality of I have a weird number of points and I still want
Yeah,
a
yeah,
tool
yeah.
like this. But I think the Breachers are quite superior, and we're about to get to them. I think Pathfinders are as well.
Yeah.
So, do you want to take Pathfinders? Do you want me?
Yeah, sure, I'll take the Pathfinders.
Okay.
So Pathfinders, straight off, their ability is they can spot for 2 units. And obviously they have the mark like keyword, so that's really good. And I find it really works well with multiple Ghostkeels, because you're often not using your Tetras to spot for your crisis suits or your broadsides. So having a Pathfinder team being able to support your Ghostkeels is quite a good pick. They do have some good ranged weapons, like we've mentioned earlier. You have access to the iron rifles for damage 2s. You also have access to the rail rifles. They've got a weird grenade launcher that's kind of okay if you pull it off. Anti-vehicle 4+, devastating wounds. Only 1 shot though. They have access to the grenade strats, which is cool. Same with breaches and strike teams, which we didn't mention. And that's an incredibly powerful strat if used correctly. But their main ability for me is that you've got 3 drones that you can take. You've got one to add a given infiltrate. It's called the recon drone.
Mm-hmm.
You have another one which gives them -2 to charge. And I think the other one adds 6 inches to the pulse range. So not so important. So I usually either go with the recon drone if I'm just taking him in a unit without a Devilfish, or I'll take him with a -2 charge and put Darkstrider in there and have him as that little package, just for, again, screening, similar roles that we mentioned with the strike and breaches. But yeah, I'd say that for me, personally, I'd probably put them between tournament staple and consistent choice.
Yeah, I think that they're going to. I think people are going to, once they put them on the table, because they went down 30 points. They were
They're 90 points now.
Hilariously overcosted. I think when people finally put them on the table, they will like them quite a bit more. I really like that they have the infiltrate rule with the recon drone, because it means you don't have to spend the extra points on the Devilfish, which, as I mentioned, can be hard to hide on a lot of boards, just due to the size of it. And with that, you can just start there in the middle of the table with the Ghostkeels, with the stealth suits, and just have a lot of pressure that can go into the center turn 1 if you needed to. So I personally think they're up there with the Breachers, and they fill a similar role. Also, the Breachers, Strike Teams, Pathfinders all have that marker-like keyword, so you can easily ignore cover with them, which is very useful.
Yeah, and I think the what you do is you put a gun drone with them as well, so that they can advance. And still, because they don't have the assault keyword, I don't believe, with the other guns
I don't believe so, yeah. I believe the Carbine lost it.
Yeah, the Pulse Carbine randomly lost it. So you put a gun drone in there, and obviously the recon drone and another drone of your choosing. And then basically they can advance and still spot and still do actions. So yeah, I think either way you could do it with the Devilfish. It's quite nice having the Devilfish scout move, but like Siegler said, it's quite hard to hide because the Devilfishes are quite big. But on their own with the recon drone, definitely. And then you can consider building that little packaging with Darkstrider, and you've got yourself a nice little fire base for forward pressure.
Yep. Moving on to the Pirhana. So this is a 55-point unit. It didn't go down, but man, it was already like at a price point that is pretty reasonable for what you get, which is a 7-wound T7 4-up save vehicle that has a 9-inch scout move, has a fusion blaster, and then 2 gun drone profiles alongside the 2 seeker missiles you can take. So it's got a decent amount of firepower. It's relatively durable. It's relatively cheap at 55 points for what you get. And it's got that scout move. So once again, there's a lot of moving parts to Tau in the early game, whether through infiltrating or scouting. You get to kind of reposition your army or position it in a really advantageous spot from the get-go, which I find quite powerful. I think they're tournament staple for sure. They are a great screen. They are super fast. They can push back your opponent. They can tie things up as well. They can act as an observer. They don't have the marker-like keyword, but it's okay. They bring a couple extra shots as well, and it's just a very solid unit. Some lists run a bunch of them just to use them as more of a damage dealer. I found that their defense kind of prevents them from effectively getting more than one turn, and they kind of have to get close to get the fusion going. But if you wanted to run them, 165 for 3 of them is not a bad price point. You kind of have to wait for Kalyan to be active, though, so that you really pop off with the exploding attacks. in that case, and they're not really a screen at that expensive price. You'd rather take a Ghostkeel for screening. But how do you feel about them?
Yeah, tournament staple. Agreed. I ran one of my first lists when I went to the Northeast Open Major, and I only lost GSC in the end. But I specifically teched for it and had 3 units of 2 Pirhanas, and I gave them all with the burst cannons rather than the fusions, and deliberately did it for that GSC pick. It worked very, very, very well. But also you could do 3 singular Pirhanas just for your secondaries and give them a fusion at that point. And also the drone harassment rule is awesome when it goes off. So at the end of the movement phase, anything within, well, 1 unit within 12, they must take a battle shot test. You do that on, let's say, a knight, it's no longer rotating. You do that on a marine unit, they're no longer doing armor of contempt. It can be so good, and it's another tool in the toolbox. So I definitely think it's tournament staple.
Yeah, 100%. Forcing battle shocks, I wish Tau had some other ways to interact with it to make it even more valuable. But all of a sudden, that key unit that wanted to use an armor of contempt now doesn't. Can be a big difference. Next up, we have the Broadside. Tell us about the Broadside.
Okay, so the Broadside. They are our T6 anti-vehicle vehicles. And what you'll often find is that with the Broadsides at the moment, the optimal loadout is to take their rails. So the rails is 2 shots, strength 12, AP4, D6 plus 1, heavy, devastating wounds. Unfortunately, you don't take the high yield missile pods because they're only AP1, so in an armor of contempt world, they're not really doing much damage, and it's damage 2s, which your cyclics are already doing your crisis suit. So this is your take a unit. Their job is to down vehicles. And the range helps, it's 60. But I like to run mine with all guns. There's 2 loadouts that I do. I do the Seeker Missile, Twin Plasma, Rails. I usually put them with missile drones because the missile drones are odd. They're AP2, strength 7, 2 damage.
AP2.
And it's like, huh?
Seems
Okay.
like the missiles should all be AP2.
Yeah, they should be AP2, all of them, but apparently the missile pods that you put on crisis suits, the missile drone knows something better than the crisis suit, so hey-ho. So I tend to put 1 marker light, 5 missile drones, and then in that unit it's got a horrendous amount of firepower, and it can, cover the angles, firing angles, objectives very well. They do have a rule which unfortunately has now become niche. They have hardened armor, which used to give you, it gave you a 4+ feel no pain against mortals. But now that devastating wounds has changed, it's not going to help you much, apart from things like Doom Bolt from T-Suns and a few other things. But I still think they're good. T6, 8 wounds. You can give them shield drones if you want, but I find there's no need. Just give them more guns. But I think me and you both agree that unfortunately they're slow, and they can be a little bit too slow for the auto pick for me. I'd say, I want to say tournament staple, but I'm thinking that consistent choice if you're taking a unit of 3, but the tournament staple if you take them in singles, I think that could be good.
Yeah, I'm of a similar mind, and you mentioned it before. Speed is what elevates a lot of armies. Having slow shooting it puts more power in your opponent's hands is a way to think about it. Your opponent now has more opportunities to screen because you're not going to walk them up the board. You're going to bring them in from strategic reserves. But then they're going to come within 6 inches of board edge. So your opponent knows that. They're already incentivized to get engaged in all fronts or whatever. So they're going to use that move to also screen out these broadsides and push them back. And then all of a sudden they come in. Now they're coming in at a screened out angle where they're not really shooting anything besides the screen. Okay, the screen dies. Now they move 5 inches, and they're never going to really see anything on the denser boards that are typical at tournaments. On lighter boards, I think they are absolutely a tournament staple and might even be an auto pick at 90 points per model. But on the typical boards you see at tournaments, they're really not getting the angles that you would want against the better armies. Against the worst armies, they probably still do. But frankly, I think that high-level tournament play, they are either a tournament staple or consistent choice due to their lack of speed. Their gun is very effective, and it's a different profile than what Tau typically has elsewhere. It's one of the few genuinely reliable anti-tank weapons. But at the same time, that lack of speed means your opponent, the better they are, the more they think about angles and pre-measure things, the less damage you're going to do with your broadsides. I just played John with my Tau into his Tyranids, and I was trying out a 2-man unit because it's not that much of an investment, 180 points. I get a different profile. It can help finish off a monster. And even there, I just found that when they come in, then they require a Tetra to really support them because they're away from Shadowsun if you're running her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm using one of my Tetras that could also be buffing a Crisis unit instead. Alright. So I just found that they kind of conflict with the style I prefer, which is more midfield board control. And they kind of fit in I'm getting into a shootout with my opponent. And they're fantastic. So I would put them as tournament stable because I think for most people that will be playing Tau at the different levels of 40k, it is a good enough unit to run and you will get value out of it. But the higher you go in the GT majors, etc., then it kind of goes down to just a consistent choice.
Yeah, and I also think that it would be really good choice on player place terrain because you can kind of design it so that you can have firing lanes. But outside of that, it's going to be difficult, especially on WTC boards and UKTC being quite tight. You'll get maybe one or two rounds of shooting off. The one thing I would probably consider if I was to give any advice to people using broadsides, always be charging. Always be charging with these guys. You might think, oh, well, they're not very good in combat. So what? You just charge them in, then you maybe give them the fallback and shoot rather than the plasmas so then they can get angles better. Help yourself by using the charge phase to gain extra movement to get into position. But then again, it kind of goes against what you want to use broadsides for. You want them as a backline support, and unfortunately, they're too slow for that.
Yeah, I found that in that game, because they couldn't shoot anything after they came in, I just advanced them onto the objective and just sat there. Kind of pricey for an objective paperweight. Then we've got the Tidewall Gunport, something like that. Yeah, Tidewall Droneport. Awesome.
Do you even know what it does?
I know that it has a big firing deck. Yeah, firing deck 11. It's T8 10 wounds with a 3-up save, 0 OC, and it moves 4 inches. Its rule is that each time the fortification is selected to shoot, its drone defenders' weapons will target and resolve attacks against every enemy unit. And these drone defenders are 20-inch range, 8 shots, hits on 5s, strength 5, no AP, 1 damage, assault, and twin-linked.
So it's basically like the gun drones that are at YGWY, but they put it on a transport.
They put it on a more expensive transport. It has the assault keyword, so it can advance. Can fortifications do actions?
That'd be hilarious.
I don't know if they can do actions or not. There aren't many fortification rules as many as the previous edition.
Yeah. Well, let's be fair. Even if it does, let's just put that in the bin and go, well, 4 Kroot Hounds can do actions done for 30 points. So,
how many points is this thing?
Oh, God, let me just check. Right, the Droneport is...
If you're behind it and your opponent's shooting through it, you get cover, though.
Oh, amazing.
It can transport 11 infantry models. It can't even transport the gun drone unit, the tactical drone unit.
Nope, can't. It's 85 points.
It's more expensive than a Devilfish.
Yeah. Should we just,
Yep. Bin it.
Put it in YGWY.
YGWY. I'm going to make this quick and just put the other ones there because...
Same. Yeah, that's literally what I've done as well.
The Shieldwall has the 5-up invuln, which whoop-de-doo on that one. It's like slightly more defensive and can fit potentially more if you combine it with the other thing. The fortifications, no.
They swing and a miss.
Yeah.
They look cool.
Yeah, they definitely look cool. I have them on our in our Art of War cabinet. I put my Tau models on it. It looks fantastic, but it is not really functional. It really hasn't been for a while. Fortifications, some factions had more impactful ones in the previous edition. 10th edition, most of them are completely garbage. I think they were like, all right, let's not even bother with these fortifications.
Yeah.
Okay.
Devilfish.
Much better than the fortifications.
Absolutely.
Commander Shadowsun.
Yep. Shadowsun next, yeah?
Yeah, Shadowsun's next. Do you want me to take her?
Yeah, go on. You take the girl.
All right, so Shadowsun is the warlord if you take her. She is a lone op. She has the infiltrate ability as well. And she has a reroll 1s to hit aura, which is anything, which is very nice. She doesn't have to be inside of a unit. She just is hanging around. She can give you reroll 1s, which puts less pressure on things like Tetras to be exposed. in order to get rerolls for your crisis unit. Because hitting on 3s with a +1 ballistic skill from For the Greater Good and rerolling 1s it's fantastic. It is pretty much as efficient as you need to be against a lot of targets. In addition, she has the ability, like you mentioned, to fall back and shoot. And she has a 5-up invuln. She's only T4, 6 wounds, but moves 10 inches. She has 2 fusion blasters that are strength 10 instead of 9 because they're high energy, and they're 18-inch range instead of 12. So that's nice. She hits on 2s. She's got some light missile pod shots and a flechette blaster, and a random pulse pistol if that ever comes up. She's got stealth, and I believe she has -1 to wound in ranged attacks. And then she also has a 6-inch aura of if you spend a stratagem on a 5-up, you gain a CP. So if it happens that you don't want to discard a tactical objective to gain a CP, you can potentially gain the CP through this ability using Strike and Fade near her or Point Blank Ambush. So she's a redundancy in case you need to generate CP. And she went down from 140 to 100 points. She is fantastic at this price point. I don't think she's mandatory by any means, but she is just a great tool. And late game, you can throw her back onto an objective. She can go do an action. And she just plays a consistent role of helping your army in a lot of different ways for relatively cheap, is how I feel about her. I think she's a tournament staple for sure.
I think she's a tournament staple, and also she's got the infantry keyword. So, like stealth suits and her, infantry is massive because she can keep up with the crisis suits quite comfortably because she doesn't really care about terrain. And all of the above reasons that you've mentioned, I find that the only times that I consider dropping her is right towards the end of the list and think, do I need her versus putting in this extra unit? Otherwise, she's always in every list.
Yep. She's in most of my lists. Sometimes I cut her because I get an extra Tetra and like an upgrade.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I kind of like the safety net that she brings.
Yeah, so for me, I think I always had a list where I was like, oh, can I put in a third Ghostkeel, but I'd have to drop Shadowsun. That's the only thing I was considering.
Yeah. Which, fair enough. Like, it is a decision point, and she's close to being an auto pick, honestly, at 100 points. Yeah. But I think she's tournament stable because you don't have to run her. There are other things that bring some similar value.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to crisis suits. So we're just going to drop them in auto pick, and then we're going to talk about why. I'm going to put them as the first one.
Would you like a bucket full of dice that you roll at your opponent and then 9 times out of 10 will delete anything in the game? Sure, you may delete yourself along the way, but if you've already done the damage, then who cares? So you arm them, shield generator, 3 cyclics. Everybody should know this by now. Even our enemies, they fear the cyclic iron blasters, but they want to watch you roll ones. They do have hazardous, which is annoying. And statistically, if you take a 6-man unit, you are rolling, with a cold star, you're rolling 21 hazardous tests. That's horrifying. But you should only lose 9 wounds, statistically. You can CP reroll it. My advice, just calculate and do the math and think, do you need to overcharge everything? If not, don't. Just don't kill yourself unless you have to. Crisis suits, we know the stat line, movement 10, T5, 4 wounds base. You take them with 2 shield drones, becomes 6 wounds, you put a cold star in there, suddenly that unit's going 18 inches and shooting anything it wants. There's no other guns that I would recommend. I was hoping that missile pods would get the AP2 rather than AP1. If so, I would definitely consider the unit of 6 with missile pods just to keep them alive. But unfortunately, cyclics are the only gun to take.
Yep. I think the second best one is fusion, specifically for the case where your opponent does try and rush you down with vehicles and monsters. Yes, you're often wounding things on 5s, but if Farsight is in the unit, then they're wounding on 4s. But you also just have the high spike potential of, okay, they only failed 3 saves. Well, it's going to be 6 plus 3d6 damage, so you're probably dead anyway. So I have experimented, like, if I don't want to run broadsides and I'm worried about a lot of vehicles, and maybe I'm not running as many move blocks, that's an option. But cyclic is by far and away the best into most things. As soon as you add, like, extra things like minus to wound and -1 damage or half damage, that's when having something like fusion could be useful. But once again, the volume usually takes you through against most targets in the entire game. So Cyclic, by far the best. I think Fusion is number 2, and then I would put Plasma.
Plasma, yeah. And I think Danny, who's a Polish Tau player who's on my Discord, he started the airburst thing where he just took a single airburst on a unit of 6 crisis just in case you don't have any targets to shoot. It was a very clever tech piece by him. Just in case you don't have any targets, you can just still shoot that airburst and fire and fade. So and there's other little tweaks you can do. You could give a crisis suit a fall back and shoot support system in case you did want to just fall back and still shoot and then fire and fade. Little tech pieces here or there, but predominantly you'll see 3 cyclic shield generators.
Yeah. I ran the airburst back in like my first game against Skyray with Tau, and I have never seen that come up. So I've kind of dropped it, but it is a cute little tech thing.
It's a tech thing, but same with me. I'm just like, well, 9 times out of 10, I'll always be shooting something, or I'll be just staging.
Yeah, and it's often because Tau don't have like 7 different key damage dealers. Most lists don't.
Yeah.
They have a couple, and so you already know, based on firing the first 1 or 2, like how much more damage you need to do. And if you're going to kill the thing that you can strike and fade off of, better not do that.
Yeah.
So straight up auto pick. This unit does everything. It is more durable than your opponent will think because you can also pop stim injectors on them. And at 6 wounds with a 6 of Phenopain, they can tank more damage than they otherwise would have. And they also are good if they're in Farsight's unit. I like using the heroic intervention strat to be able to tie things up or kill chaff that's trying to get on the objective. I also really like the ability of the crisis suits with the Cold Star to be able to just threaten angles. Simply putting out dice and saying, here's the places I can move with this unit will scare your opponent into playing more defensive or risk just losing their key unit, and then you simply win off of that. At a certain point, it comes down to, okay, I am going to be able to get this angle. I'm going to kill this unit. And even if my opponent kills most of my crisis unit in return, I've probably won at this point.
Yeah. And then having a second crisis suit unit, whether it be 3-man or a 6-man in Deep Strike, with the fear of you rapid ingressing, is another thing that can just literally flip a game on its head. A cleverly timed rapid ingress with a 3-man crisis team with a Cold Star can just straight up win you a game.
Yep. I talked about how the Ghostkeel can force out action. Having one of these in reserve also does the same thing. It forces out screens to push you back. And now you get to kill their screens for free. And late game, once again, they have that action economy and that secondary economy where they just don't have as many resources. And often they're trading their stuff that's good at controlling primary.
Yeah, and if we did lose the -1 ballistic skill for the greater good, then gun drones would be a possibility. But don't consider them because you don't need them.
Exactly, yeah. Not with Cyclic being everywhere.
Not with Cyclic, no.
All right, then we have next up the Devilfish. We mentioned it a couple times. My personal opinion on the Devilfish is that at 75 points, that is a good price point for what you get. It's a T9 13 wound vehicle, 3-up save, can easily get covered because of how big it is, and you can get a scout move on it if you put Pathfinders inside. It has a random. It has an okay accelerated burst cannon. You can put the 2 SMS things on it, which are kind of mediocre to bad, and then it can have 2 seeker missiles. So 20 points more than a Pirhana. You've got similar firepower, but then it also has T9 instead of T7 and 13 wounds instead of 7. Just seems like a nice upgrade for 20 points. The issue I have with the Devilfish is that it is such a gigantic physical model that it often wants to be in the spaces where your crisis suits and other units are. I have a hard time fitting it where it can't get shot back, because as soon as it gets shot in your half of the board, it kind of just lost its entire purpose. It's supposed to be projecting threat and supposed to be able to advance and then disembark breachers near objectives and all that stuff. So you kind of have to, on a lot of boards, put it into strategic reserves. And like Kyle said, some tournaments rule differently on whether you can get out and then be closer than 9 away with them, the breachers that disembark. So I have found that I often start cutting the Devilfish because I just can't fit it in the spaces where I would want it. And I already have a lot of stuff that I want to put in reserves. So I have found that I typically cut it, and that's why I've been running Pathfinders with Darkstrider, because they just get the infiltrate ability with the recon drone and start there, and I don't need the Devilfish as much. But if you're running breachers, I think you absolutely want at least one Devilfish, which either acts as a relay station. So you disembark the first unit, it goes in the center, contests the primary, kills some chaff, and another unit gets in and does the same thing the next turn. Or, like Kyle said, use strategic reserve to manipulate objectives on the flanks. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think in addition to everything you said, I think when you take in a Devilfish, because it's got, don't take the SMS, take the gun drones, because then it can obviously advance and still do actions for you, and obviously you can spot and then do an action. So it's actually doubles down as a secondary achiever as well. It can do your secondary points for you. I find that I like the revolving doors. Like with the Devilfish, you can go, okay, cool, one guy gets out, one guy gets in. I think that'd been quite clever. If only it had kept that ability that we used to have, in Cairn, where you could just be within 6 inches of the board and go off.
Yeah.
I think it was 9 or something, if I remember serves me correctly. It was really good. I think if it had that, it would be an auto pick. But I think for now, 1 to 2, depending on how your list is built.
What do you think, tournament staple or consistent choice?
I'd say tournament staple because we're probably going to see at least one breacher fish. If you're taking a breacher fish, you need a Devilfish, so it has to be tournament staple if they are.
Okay, that makes total sense to me. Next up is the Riptide. Tell us about the Riptide.
Okay, so T9, 4 up in one still, 2+ save. Doesn't have any of the utility that it used to have, in terms of no auto 2d6 move, shoot and fade, 5 up feel no pain, so it's lost a lot of that, but it's actually only 180 points. So let's talk about what it does have. So it has an ability that you can do your Nova, and it basically turns it into Devastating Wounds, but it's just once per game. So the way that works, once per battle in your shooting phase, select one ranged weapon, so obviously you're going to select the decent gun that it has, whether it be the Iron or whether it be the Burst, you get Devastating Wounds. The good thing about the Riptide is it has both the battlesuit support system to fall back and shoot, and it also has the weapon support system to ignore any and all hit modifiers. So it's going to be reliably hitting on the 3s if you're spotting for it, which you should be doing. And it's T9, and it's got 14 wounds, and it's OC4. So the problem that it has for me is that its guns are already overlapping what our cyclics do, because it's only strength 8.
Why?
If it had anti-vehicle, then I would be interested. If it had a higher strength with the Ion, I'd be interested. But for me, I think it overlaps what the crisis suits do for shooting. But then if you're using it as a bully, then I'm sorry, but your Ghostkeels just do this better, which is really bizarre. It's kind of a weird turn of the table. But I still think we're going to see maybe, a singular one, maybe a couple, if people just love the model, because it is a gorgeous model. But for me, I just don't see it doing the role of the Ghostkeel or doing the shooting role of the Crisis. So for me, it's a bit of a loss at the moment. So I'd say a consistent choice.
Yeah, for 180 points, it is solid. The problem is it's outperformed on both sides of the spectrum, like you mentioned, by other options in the Tau roster. At 180 points, it's okay. It is decidedly average. It doesn't do anything very well. It just does a couple things: defense, decent shooting, together. If it was stated at its old points, it would be YGWY though, because it really performed no role whatsoever in that.
What I find funny is that maybe they just gave up or got confused when writing the Riptide's rules, because they've given it the support system that ignores any and all hit modifiers, but then when it's down to 1 to 4 wounds, it subtracts 1. Wait, what?
A bunch of units have that.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what? What was the point?
Yeah, it's because they just kept that as a generic degradation thing, and then some units have the rule to just ignore it, like Stormsurges as well.
Like a Stormsurge. Hey, but let's now just... I think the one plus to the Riptide is that it gets its missile drones for free.
It does get the missile drones and the Twin-Link Plasma as well, so it's like comparable. It
comparable.
has a decent output.
Decent output, yeah.
Now we have the Stealth Suits. This unit is fantastic. It went from 75 points to 60. It has Infiltrate, Stealth, and its key rule, in my opinion, is the fact that you can rapid ingress for free. Meaning you don't have to spend CP on it, and you can instead save them for strike and fade and your other stratagems, point blank ambush, grenade strat, whatever other things you can spend it on. This is fantastic. Now, I don't always use the free thing because sometimes I need them in a different space or I need to threaten a different angle, but the option to just have it free, put them down exactly where they would be in the middle anyway, and have forced out all those screens from my opponent, that is worth it. And for 60 points, it's an absolute steal. You can throw the gun drone on there so they can advance and do actions, marker drones so they give you the marker-like keyword when they act as an observer. It is a utterly fantastic unit. I always have one in every single list I write.
Yep. I've gone the other way. I used to have one in every list. Sometimes I used to have two because when I cottoned on to the double rapid ingress, I was like, perfect. And I had a whole plan in my head of, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll have two stealth suits operating either nearer together or opposite sides. I'll rapid ingress 2 units, save my CP, so I got full CP, then jump out with 2 crisis suit units, and then fire and fade them both. I had it all planned out, and then obviously they changed it. And I think for me, the stealth suits, they are cheap, 60 points, but they overlap with Tetras, which we'll get onto. And I think when it comes down to points, if I've got 3 Ghostkeels, then I'm like, well, I don't really need the stealth. Their reroll 1s to wound for spotting is nice. It can help deal with that anti-tank. I do like that. So I'm not going to knock them for that. I just think with my lists, I'm often than not spending my points elsewhere, and I've ended up dropping them completely, which does make me sad because I do like their abilities. I agree the rapid ingress for free is awesome, and the fact that you can do it, you don't have to be wholly within, just one model within 3 of them, and then you can string them out. And I think the key play that allows you to do this for free is you could even just rapid ingress onto objectives because you can string them out and do some primary tricks with them.
Yeah,
so I do see them. Yeah, I do see them, but unfortunately my list, I just can't afford to take them with what I'm taking currently.
I would also say that if you are in a solo crisis build where you only have 1 brick, that usually is starting on the table, and so you don't have as much need for them. So in double crisis, I really like them, but we can put them as a tournament staple because I think they'll be very popular.
I definitely agree in tournament staple. Even though I'm not currently running them, I definitely have used them all the time in the previous list I've had.
All right, next up, Mr. Farsight himself. He went from 120 to 90 points. He gives you access to a very unique rule, which is you get access to +1 to wound. That's shooting in combat. If your model is within 9 of an enemy model. So that is a lot of extra damage. All of a sudden, your strength 8 weapon that needs to wound on 5s against this tough target, it's wounding on 4s, and it's a massive, massive deal. On top of that, he opens up a whole bag of tricks, which is access to tank shock, access to the heroic intervention strat since they're walkers, access to some combat to actually finish the thing off that you left on 1 or 2 wounds. He is just a hero, and I'll say in the game I played against John's Tyranids, his unit tanked a ton of damage, his unit died, he survived. He then walked into the Tyranid army, shot his plasma into 3 zoanthropes, got 3 hits, 3 wounds, killed the 3 of them, charged the exocrine, got on the objective, survived in combat and from the Overwatch, denied the 8 primary, survived the battle shock test, and that's exactly what Farsight can do. Now, he's not going to do that every game, but man, he's a different tool than anything else in this book, and I have loved using him in pretty much every game. I run typically double cold start, Farsight, and Shadowsun. Yep. And the reason I only run usually 2 crisis units, the reason that I do this is because in certain matchups, Commander Farsight is essential for stopping your opponent from trying to threat overload you. Because now, on turn 2, you have the Exemplar or the Kalyan unit, and you have Farsight's +1 to wound unit. And if they step into the middle and try and threat overload you, they get hit like a ton of bricks from both of them, and you can do that kind of sweet crippling damage. He can start in rapid ingress as well, come down, be able to move, and then easily get within those 9 inches for the +1 to wound as well. But I find that because he stops your opponent from trying to threat overload you and let you get into turn 3, 4 when Kalyan is fully active, his value is just that option to be able to use him that way. Otherwise, he just acts as a mission tool and is solid in combat with that once per game full reroll state and wound. How do you feel about him?
I think you've hit the whole they're the key points there. One thing I like about him is that because A, he's a cool model, B, anyone who has played Tau for more than 30 seconds loves the lore of him, and he forces you in game to actually play your crisis suits aggressively. So I think one of the biggest learning curves for any Tau player, whether you're just starting or whether you're a veteran, is sometimes knowing when to push and when to be conservative. If you've got a dude with a giant sword who's as awesome as Farsight, you want to push him up and get into combat with your giant sword. So it forces you to play aggressively, and I think that's exactly what he offers, especially around that mid board, like you said. That +1 to wound, it works in combat as well, and all of the extra abilities that you wouldn't usually be doing, like tank shock and stuff like that, that becomes crucial, and you start to think about the charge phase, how to position your unit, stealing objectives. I just love it, and it doesn't feel complete if I don't have at least something that can play that kind of charge role in my list. And back in the old editions, we used to do it with Riptides, we used to do it with all the commanders, with the Enforcer, with the Flamer. This is just giving a little bit of that back. So yeah, tournament, I'd say, is an auto pick for me.
I think he's also an auto pick. The community might disagree with us and say that he's not as good as the Cold Star. The thing is, he might not 1-to-1 with the Cold Star. You're always taking one Cold Star first, for sure. The difference is that Farsight then opens up being able to use a crisis unit in a different way and punch up in a different way, especially with Cyclic. So I personally prefer the full package that he brings, which is a lot more thorough than what the Cold Star brings, which is making a crisis unit a missile of damage. Whereas he can make a unit a flex option that can do a lot of different things, and a lot of things your opponent won't suspect or prepare for.
Yeah, and I think the change with the fact that everything's just got cheaper, the reason we didn't really take him before was because it was always Aun'va, because he was just 65 points of awesome lone op. But now that we're able to fit in more Ghostkeel, we don't necessarily need Aun'va, so therefore for 90 points, he makes your crisis suit's efficiency go through the roof. And then that unit, for me, is used in the middle brawler, whereas then your other crisis suit unit can go off into their enemy deployment zone, and you can sit crisis and Farsight in the middle and go, cool, this is now my objective. You want to come near me? You will die.
Yep. All right. Next up is the basic Kroot. I believe they are 55 points now for the 10
Correct.
levels.
55 points for 10, 110 for 20.
So it's a reasonable cost for 10 bodies that can string out. We mentioned the Farstalkers. They can be a screen as well, and they can do similar types of move blocks. They have effectively no defense, and they effectively do no damage either. But they are just 10 cheap bodies that can screen, do actions, whatever it is. Once again, if I'm given this choice, I always want to try and find the 5 points to upgrade them to stealth suits or something else. So I'm not really a person who runs too many of the regular Kroot. How about you?
No. No, I've not run Kroot, even though I do kind of want to. They just perform the role that my Kroot Hounds could do for cheaper. So I just don't really like them. I don't think for 55 points, even though it's cheap, I just don't think you put them in your lists. I think I'd say they're average. They're not YGWY. There is some funny thing you could do with Aun'shi and put Aun'shi in a unit of Kroot and make them OC2. But again, that's a very niche list pick. But for me, I do find it funny that Aun'shi's just like, yeah, I'm just going to join these Kroot boys. Yeah, let's go.
He's going to get him beefed up.
Yeah. If anybody goes to a tournament and has 20 Kroot and with Aun'shi and wins, whether it's an RTT, let me know. I want to know how.
I'm going to scoot up all the Games Workshop stuff first so the Forgeworld can be at the end. So let's continue the Kroot trend and do the Krootox.
Yeah.
And this is a unit that I typically don't run. It's 35 points, but you have run. Do you want to give a breakdown of the Krootox and why you've run it in the past?
Yeah, okay. So basically it's 35 points and it's OC2. Forget its gun, forget its combat ability. It's not there for that. It's a 35-point model with OC2. It's got your scout move. It's a screen. It's an action monkey. You put it in strat reserve so that it can't be indirected. Basically, it's not young Khan bait. And it can do secondaries for you, like investigate signals, engage on all fronts. It's 35 points. So usually some towel lists, you'll have like 90, 95 points left at the end to play with. Just put in one of these bad boys and 2 Kroot Hounds. And also, think of it this way. To go onto an objective, sometimes you use a unit like a Pirhana or something to bait them out. Or you can just send a single Krootox guy to go and sit on that objective and go, you got to come and deal with this. Are they going to trade a unit that's more than... Do they have units that are 35 points? If the answer is no, then you're instantly trading up. So for me, a single Krootox rider performs multiple roles: secondaries, primary bait, and screens.
Should we put a consistent choice if you choose to take it?
I'd say consistent choice, yeah.
Okay, I think that's fair.
And I think consistent choice, and then if there's just a single one, you will definitely see a tournament staple if they've had 35 points left over.
I feel relatively the same about Kroot Hounds. This is a unit that I always ran like 2 to 3 of in 9th edition, but haven't as much in 10th edition, even though they're only a little bit more expensive at 30 points for the 4 models. It's still a fast-moving thing. It's got that scout move. You can throw it in strategic reserve and do the same exact stuff. It's OC 0 now, so it doesn't do the contest objectives plays anymore, but still can do actions and all that stuff. No problem. The issue here, I find, is that I want as many sources that have the for the greater good rule as possible for my buffing my army, especially in the late game. And I just find that I would rather spend the extra points for the Pirhana or the stealth suits rather than just the Kroot Hounds, is how I have felt in my games. So I would rate them probably as a consistent choice because they will do that cheap screen action 100% of the time, but I haven't felt the need that I have to have them in my lists. How do you feel?
Yeah, I've not needed them, and also I think this you want to use them as screens, but indirect is still a thing, and the moment they're on the board, they're dead.
Yeah.
And also it gives away like no prisoners who draw the secondary card and stuff like that. So I do find they're very useful for coming on in like this turn 2 onwards from strat reserve, but I've not needed them as much as you because I've been taking things like Pirhanas or Tetras that can do that job as well. But I think that if you're left over with a few points here or there, they're not bad. I think a lot of people are very hooked up on still using the Kroot Hounds as their kind of crutch to screen, and I think they can actually do a lot of hindrance to your lists and just take something that's more durable.
Yeah, and interacts with your army more.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like a lot of the stuff going down is now only a bit more expensive than Kroot Hounds, not dramatically more expensive.
Well, like you said before, I mean, I think it was 2 Kroot Hounds is 60 point, 2 units of 4 Kroot Hounds, that's a stealth suit unit.
Yep.
And it'll do a hell of a lot more for your army than 2 Kroot Hounds will.
Next up is the Vespid. This is going to be an interesting one because they have one of the few ways where you can go back into reserve with Tau, which is something Tau used to have more of. And most armies in the game have that rule, except it happens at the end of your opponent's movement phase. These, for whatever reason, happen at the end of your movement phase. I don't know why it's done that way, but effectively the reason the difference is important is because when you go up at the end of your opponent's movement phase, you then draw your cards, the Vespid are still in reserve, and then you decide if you want to bring them down to do that or not, or be a screen or whatever, or you just bring them in your backfield and go back up again. That's what things like the Calidus Assassin and other such units do. These ones, on the other hand, it's your turn, you draw your secondaries, you know what they are, and then you decide, do I want to bring these Vespid up or not? They're not coming down. They're not going to be in the position to do it, right? Is the timing the end of movement phase?
Yeah. I look at the Vespid. At the end of your movement phase, if the unit is not within an engagement range of enemy units, you can remove it from the battlefield and place it into strategic reserves.
Exactly. So you can't like immediately come up and come down because it's not in the reinforcement step. So you miss that timing where you just get guaranteed secondaries, which is why the rule is so strong. It is still good because turn 3, okay, it's my movement phase, I'll go up. Turn 4, I will come down. And ideally, if I draw behind enemy lines, teleport homers, whatever it is, then I will be perfectly fine. But it's not as consistent as that rule should be, and they didn't go down. I was hoping that they would go down. There's still 75 points, which now 5 more points gets you 2 Tetras. 15 less points is a stealth suit unit. It's tricky. I always want to have them in my list for that safety net, but I found I don't typically need them, especially because Ghostkeels can do this type of stuff in the late game anyway, that if they're on the flanks. So I think that they're a consistent choice if you take them for that role. You just say 75 points in my list. We'll make sure it turns 4 or 5 if I draw a card that I really need that's in my opponent's backfield. I can do it without having to move the rest of my army.
Yeah, I think the only times that they are a tournament staple for me is if you're going in with a fixed game, a fixed kind of secondary plan. Because then you're in control of that. If you're doing deploy teleport homers or you're doing engage on all fronts or whatever it is, or behind enemy lines, you can do that. But outside of that, they're just too expensive. I was expecting it'd probably be like 12 points a model, so it would be like 60 points for a unit of 5, or maybe 50 points. Then I'd be definitely taking them. But for the 75 points, it's just too much to justify.
Yeah, you can rapid ingress them and get that angle where you can contest an objective, do the secondary stuff. Like, they have good utility. I just find that they're always the last thing to not make the list. Like, if I had another 100 points or so, I'd probably find a way to fit them in.
Yeah.
All right, next up and last codex, I have the 2 Ethereals. They weren't on the original list, but don't worry, Aun'va and Aun'shi are coming. But the Firesight Marksman, he, at the beginning of the edition, is something I liked quite a bit. Just leave it on a flank. It's a lone op. I don't care that it does any shooting. It really does nothing. But it is a marker-like keyword lone op that can just stay there out in the firing angles. And then all of a sudden, Games Workshop said, here's the Forgeworld lineup. And we found the Tetra. And the Tetra outperforms the Marksman by a significant margin, even though it's not a lone op. So if you run the Marksman for its role of just a marker-light for the greater good observer that doesn't really die and screens, it's a consistent choice in my opinion. But I think it's outshone by the Tetra, which we can just do as the next one and come back to the 2 Ethereals. Because I think that'll inform why it's a consistent choice. Tell us about the Tetra.
So the Tetras basically are effectively body of a Pirhana, T7, 7 wounds, 4 up save, but they have a couple of key notable differences, such as infiltration. They have a ability that when they are the spotter, they give the guided unit full rerolls to hit. That's just insane in terms of a multiplier, especially if we're running 3 cyclics on our crisis suits. So an average crisis suit unit, if it's a 6-man, will be doing 54 shots. Imagine if you were hitting on 3s with 4 rerolls. Oh, and imagine if you had exploding 6s and you could just fish for 6s. It just makes your crisis teams and other stuff so much more lethal on the battlefield. So as soon as that came out, you're thinking, that's a pretty good rule. Must be really expensive, right? No. 80 points, and you get 2 Tetras for 80 points. So you've got 14 wounds, a unit that infiltrates, and they are, by the way, they are so tiny, they are ridiculous, so you can hide them easy. And yeah, so you can spot and then do actions as well. So they're fulfilling multiple roles. They're making your guns hit harder. They're doing your actions. They're infiltrating, screening. They're 80 points.
They're OC2 per body, so it's OC4.
Yeah.
So it's like hard to contest the objective back too. Like it's not automatic. The unit is insanely valuable, and I always run at least 2 of them.
Yeah, at least 2. Yeah. And I think now with the fact that our army got cheaper, you might be encouraged to take a third damage dealer, or a third hammer as we call it. So it could be 2 crisis teams and a broadside team. Then just take 3 units of them. Mm-hmm. If you don't own them, not a problem. You probably want to try and get at least like 2 of them. But if you don't, stealth suits are a poor man's Tetra. But the Tetras are just so good and they do so much for Tau.
Yeah. Like stealth suits, the math-wise, they're like just a little bit worse.
Just a little bit worse,
as long as you're running Shadowsun. So then it puts more emphasis on having Shadowsun plus the stealth suits. And at that point, it's close enough, so don't feel too bad if you don't have the Tetras. But if you do have them, I typically run 1 to 2 because it's not simply the efficiency of their observer roll. It's the fact that it's 14 wounds, like Kyle mentioned, of T7, that like all of a sudden they can tie up all sorts of things that your Ghostkeels don't want to get tied up with because they're doing other important things. So now the Tetras just do it, and they do it fantastically well.
And it's just with the whole thing of being able to spot stuff, even because they're a vehicle as well. So even if you're tied in combat, you can still spot because you're still eligible to shoot. There's some weird interactions that you can do where, for example, you can still spot stuff with the greater good rule, even if it's got loan up, because you just required to see them, not
Yep.
for them to be an eligible target. It's
Yep.
for you to be an eligible to shoot. So you could spot with Tetras from downfield, and the Ghostkeel could wander within 12 of a loan up and shoot it with full rerolls. Honestly, the Tetras for me are auto pick, and I was quite surprised that they didn't get a points increase, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was because tower's so low that they weren't going to
Yeah.
increase any of the points. But in a future update, it is possible that they go up. But right now at 80 points, they are fantastic.
I mean, even if they went up to 100 points, 120 points, I'd still take them.
I wouldn't take 3 then.
No, I'd probably just take 2 units, maybe one. But no, they're good.
All right, let's do the 2 Ethereals, the named ones, and then we'll have a couple Forgeworld data sheets, which I think will go pretty quick because most of them are horrendously bad.
Yeah.
So which of the 2 Ethereals do you want to do?
I'll do Aun'shi,
You'll do Aun'shi, the combat one?
the combat one, man. Yeah.
You did mention him before with your crew.
I did, yeah, I did. It goes in a Kroot unit. Right, let's move on. Right, so let's have a look. Right, so Aun'shi. So his combat's a bit meh. He's a cool model. He's got abs for days. His sword looks like he's gonna. Well, his spear thing is whatever it is. It's 6 attacks. It's called Fidelity.
Yeah.
6 attacks. Sustain hits 1. Weapon skill 3. Strength 5. Hang on a minute, guys. It's got an AP. It's got AP 1, and it's indeed 2 damage. So it's a better honor blade. So invulnerable save 5 plus 3 wounds. T3. So he's not that survivable, but he has a couple of abilities. So the abilities are, while he's leading a unit, add 1 to the OC characteristics of models in that unit. He's got Martial Warrior, so when he does get into combat, you can get the precision ability, devastating wounds, or the sustain hits 2 with a whirling stance. So let's not beat around the bush. He's not that impressive. Even though he's got abs, he ain't using them properly. But what I do like about it is the fact that he can join units. Leader, he can join breaches. Okay, cool. I can see that. He can join strike teams. Yeah, cool. Also join Kroot. So I don't know if that's a typo.
I think he does in the lore. He's like more lore friendly to the auxiliaries.
Yeah. So just if you want a bit of fun, if you're having a friend in the game, a couple of beers at home with a mate, yeah, put him in unit 20 Kroot and go to town. But for me, it's kind of very niche.
Yeah.
I don't want to put him in YGWY because I don't want to do that to my boy Aun'shi, but it's very niche.
Yeah. There may come a point where Necron Warriors are over everybody's existence and Cyclic Ion gets nerfed somehow. In that case, having a 30 OC Breacher unit is somewhat interesting. But for now, no.
No, yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll put him down there at the niche pick. And then let's do Mr. Aun'va. So the thing about Aun'va is he is 65 points, and you might expect that he would be a awesome buff piece for this army, and you would be entirely wrong because he does very little for the army. He gives you +1 leadership and +1 to your battle shock tests, which is fine. For some reason, he's leadership 7. Because why? I don't know. He's worse than a normal Ethereal. Whatever. But he gives you this benefit, which is okay. It's not really any sort of thing that I would go out of my way to get. If it was a like second or third rule on a data sheet, it would be totally fine. And in this case, it is totally fine because he has other rules. He's a lone op. He's -1 to hit and wound. And once per game, he can have a 2-up invuln instead of his normal 4-up invuln. His bodyguard, he's got the 2 bodyguards for ablative wounds, and he himself has 5, I believe. So he, as a lone op that's 65 points with a bunch of ablative wounds that can pop a 2-up invuln, always -1 to hit and wound, is literally a just tank. He is a cheap Ghostkeel. You throw him into your opponent, you charge stuff, you screen, their main damage dealer or one of their damage dealers that really wants to shoot you, they're stuck in combat with Aun'va. it sucks for them. They're never going to get out of there if they can't fall back, shoot, and do stuff. And in that case, he just kind of sits there and requires a lot more damage than you would want to put into him. It took against Deathwatch, it took like a whole Sternguard team to just kill him because they had the dev wounds. It's like, come on, he is ludicrously undercosted for a durable lone op like this, but he doesn't do what he should in the lore, which is buff the army in a significant way. So I think if you don't run Farsight, he's pretty much automatic in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely, auto pick if you don't run Farsight, and I can beat your the Aun'va story. I went against a fellow Tau player, and he threw his Aun'va in the middle to do some stuff. So I shot him with 6 crisis suits and my cold star, and he was left on 3 wounds. He just passed every single invuln, and I was like, are you kidding me right now? And then finally, he failed some saves near the end. I was like, oh, thank God, because he was slow rolling it for CP. I was like, oh, come on. So having to watch him take 60 saves, I was just like, this is getting ridiculous. And then it's just a hologram, damn it. Just turn it off at the button at the back. just being able to pop that 2-up invuln is, it's just insane.
There's a couple counters to him. There's a couple armies that do have mortal wounds or the grenade strat, tank shock, that type of stuff that can get through him. But then you force CP for a 65-point model. Heck yeah, I'll do it.
Hell yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely auto pick if you're not taking Farsight.
All right, and we have 6 Forgeworld data sheets, which I think will be quite easy. I believe all of these are utter trash, which is unfortunate. Do you want to talk about any of them specifically?
I think the only one of note, one of the guys called Tez in my Discord uses the Tiger Shark quite a lot, and he loves it. And I do think that's okay. I don't think it's anything special, but he has been having some success with it because it's a T11 flyer, 5-up invulnerable save, 18 wounds, and its range weapons are not bad. You know, you can take the Swift Strike Railgun, devastating wounds, strength 20, AP 5, D6 plus 6, and then it's got some other miscellaneous guns. I have not run it, I don't own it, but it's got 2 iron cannons, 2 missile pods, 2 burst cannons, and it can swap one of its guns for the rail. It's not bad. Points wise, the strafing run. It's in your shooting phase after this model is shot. Select one enemy unit hit by one of those attacks. That enemy unit must take a battle shock test.
Which is fine.
Which is alright.
For the points that you have to pay for these things and their lack of defense for their points, I just find that most good armies are shooting armies, and right now they are geared up to kill like 20 Necron Warriors, or 10 Deathwing Knights, or 10 Black Templar Terminators, or Redemptors. And then they look at something like this and they're like, oh, it's just dead. No problem. I got plenty of firepower for that. So I think these type of units are hurt by the meta that exists at tournaments, but once again, if you run these units in casual play, they're not so heinously bad, but in tournament play, they're pretty much never going to see play. Talking trying to win majors and super majors.
Yeah, unfortunately not. And there's a couple of things that, for me, I really wanted the Yavara to come back, but it's...
I wish it would. It needs higher AP it needs its old profiles back, and then I would consider it again. Because it's also not as fast as it was. It doesn't have the teleport. It lost every rule, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it has that kind of, that one turn, it pops it for its Nova, it can move characteristic of 18, but your fly doesn't work in the same way that it used to. It's going to be around terrain, and then its guns are anemic. So, great. What's it doing that a Ghostkeel isn't? In fact, I'd probably say the Ghostkeel could probably outshoot this thing.
Yeah, it really does. The Arvarna went down to like 200, and the Yavara only went down like 20 points. So it's like still 215.
It's 210, the Yavara.
If these things were still the Riptide cost, then I would still probably not even take them, but at least I could think about them. So,
and it's the same with the... let's have a look at the Remora Stealth Drones. How many... what are they?
It's a model that I love.
160 points. Oh.
I ran these guys for a while because the key was that they were an amazing screening tool, and they used to be able
Yes.
to score engage on all fronts and all that type of stuff back in 8th edition. But as
Hmm.
an aircraft, you could only charge aircraft if you had the fly keyword and all this other stuff, so you could move block with them, be annoying, and they were relatively cheap back then, I believe 60 points a model.
60 points a model.
Now they're 80 points a model, and you have to run 2 of them. You used to be able to run them solo. It's just too much.
It is.
They've really killed this data sheet because it never really did much damage, and now
Yep.
it does nothing.
And if you're trying to use them to block and move when they get within a certain range, they're just going to get shot and die. So you paid 160 points for a rule that is never going to pay off because they'll just shoot them.
They have the cool rule where if you end a move within 9 of them, I believe, they make a 6-inch move or something.
6-inch move, yeah. So that's what I was talking about, the aerial disengagement. So you could do that, but what they'll do is they'll just not move within 9 of you, shoot them, and you're like, oh,
You're like, oh.
that's 160 points of just why did I bother? Why GWY?
You could run 4 Tetras or 2 of these guys.
Oh god, yeah, there you are. Don't spend your money on Remoras. Buy more Tetras.
Yeah. And that should wrap us up for Tau. It's pretty balanced, honestly. There's quite a few data sheets towards the bottom, but only a handful of them are completely terrible. In previous editions, that line was quite a bit more full, frankly. There's several units that are more niche, and hopefully with I think just points decreases will bring those up and make them more playable. The average units, they probably either get a little bit cheaper further, or they need some sort of data sheet tweak when Tau get a codex to help them out and do something like fundamentally unique. The consistent choices, super solid. If you run them in the list, they'll do the role they're meant to, but you don't have to run those units. Tournament staples, you're going to see these more often than not. And then those auto picks, you're going to see them in most tournament lists and most lists that are doing well. So Tau have a pretty nice balance. It's dramatically more so than before the points update, when a lot of stuff would have been towards average and below. But I'm very excited about Tau. Kyle, I know you're excited about Tau. How do you feel about the list?
Yeah, I'm very excited for 2 reasons. Before, it felt like we were shoehorned into just taking the most oppressive shooting that we can and just go for damage dealers and single little piranhas per mission play. Now, I think with the points reductions, we've got our utility tools back, and we've got our flavor, Breachfish, Pathfinders, Darkstrider, Ghostkeels in more than 1 or 2. And I think that you can actually play Tau how we used to, with a mixture of things. I always love Tau when they're balanced. I hate them when they're oppressively good, and I enjoy them most when they're actually the underdog because it challenges me as a player. Mm-hmm. Now I feel that we're in a good little balance between the two. I still think it's not easy. I don't think you can just pick up Tau and just win. You do still have to kind of be cognitive about your positioning and your deployment, but I think you've got more tools than you ever had now, and you should look to try and create a balanced list for a meta that, let's be fair, I know I am suffering from a little bit of list paralysis, and I think a lot of top players are as well, because we don't know what the meta is going to be going into tournaments after the balanced data slate. Mm-hmm. But you should definitely look at all options and put as many tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Tau has always kind of shown, especially with player skill, when it was a toolbox army. When it was just jam 18 crisis suits or whatever the most efficient gun is up there, then it came down to a stat check. Tau could still try and stat check people. You could run 18 crisis, 3 commanders, and then just a bunch of cheap units. I think that list will fall off against other very good players in certain lists. But when you build a full toolkit and you force your opponent to have to make tough choices, which a lot of the units towards the top of this do force that, I think Tau are in a fantastic spot, and it's an army that's a lot more fun to play now with the balance update, and I'm really excited for it. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me here. If people want to find out where you're at, what they can, how they can get into contact with you, how they can learn more from you, where can they go?
So I'll be sharing a link. It's via the website that I use that links it directly to my Discord. It's a service provider called WAP. I'll give the link, and you click on the link and you've got multiple options. You've got the free community side, so if you just want to join, see what it's about, and get comfortable, more than welcome. Great or good, come on board, have a look around. For those people that want to maybe up their gameplay and they want to know kind of some more of the optical picks, I do regular classes constantly with my audience, and we've got various different tiers that you can take part in, and on a month-by-month subscription basis. So I'd love to get you on board, have your support. But if you just want to come and join in and see what it's about, come and click on the link that we'll provide below, and then obviously you can come and join in. But that's where you can find me. Otherwise, social media, I'll be at all the tournaments. My next big tournament is the LGT. There's going to be some marketing done around the invitationals, which I'm going to on the day before. So keep an eye out, and it'll all be on the internet, and you can click on it and come and join in.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you're excited about Tau, let us know in the comments what you're most excited for. Do you agree with our choices? What have you been having success with on the table since the balance update released? Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends about us. All of that massively helps us. And if you're interested in more Tau content from me, I do it in the War Room, thewarroom.vhx.tv. There's a 3-day free trial. Check it out. Some of the games that I mentioned are in there, including the brand new Tau vs. Tyranids on this balanced data slate. And it's a barn burner. Farsight does amazing Farsight things, and you'll really enjoy it. So check that out. The Tau State of the Faction is in there as well with a lot of different list variants. So check it out. And we just really appreciate all your support. If you like this type of content in general, let us know. We will plan to do more faction tier lists in the future. And if it's something you're interested in, please do let us know because we take all your feedback on board. And thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Kyle, again. So long for now.